The gas pump died with a wheeze and a bang that echoed across the empty lot like a gunshot. Sage Morningstar stared at the black smoke curling from the ancient machine and felt her last thread of hope snap. Mama? 8-year-old Ivy peered around the corner of the station's paint-peeled building, her wolf-keen nose already picking up the acrid smell of burnt wiring. Is it broken again? Again. As if the pumps had been working long enough between breakdowns to merit that word. Sage wiped her grease-stained hands on her jeans and forced a smile she didn't feel. Just a little hiccup, baby. Go back inside with Owen. But it wasn't a hiccup. It was a death rattle. Sage had inherited Moonrise gas station 6 months ago when Alpha Garrett died, along with a mountain of debt and the pack's collective scorn. The Silverpine pack had made their feelings clear from day one. She was nobody, an Omega who'd somehow conned their Alpha into leaving her his junk pile, instead of passing it to his rightful heir, Beta Victor Ironwood. Never mind that Garrett Morningstar had been her father. Never mind that he'd never once acknowledged her as his daughter, leaving her to scrape by on the pack's edges while his legitimate family lived in the big house on the hill. The pack preferred their version of the story, that she was a gold digger who'd manipulated a dying man. The truth was Messier. The truth always was. Sage Morningstar. The voice cut through the afternoon heat like a blade. She turned to find Alpha Riker Shadomir standing beside a gleaming black SUV, his pale eyes taking in the smoking pump, the cracked asphalt, the rust-stained building that had seen better decades. He was younger than most Alphas, maybe 35, with the kind of cold handsomeness that belonged on magazine covers rather than gas stations. He'd taken over the pack 3 months ago when the former Alpha retired, and his first order of business had been a modernization initiative that mostly involved making Sage's life hell. Alpha. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze even though every instinct screamed at her to look away. Omega or not, she had pride. I see you're having equipment troubles. His tone was conversational, but Sage caught the steel beneath it. Riker Shadomir didn't make social calls. Nothing I can't handle. Can't you? He stepped closer, and she caught his scent, pine and snow and something darker underneath. Power, pure and simple. Because from where I stand, it looks like you're running a health hazard. Those pumps are older than some pack members. The building's falling apart. The convenience store hasn't had fresh inventory in weeks. Each word hit like a physical blow because they were all true. Sage had been patching and repatching everything she could, stretching every dollar until it screamed, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I'm working on it. Are you? Riker's smile was winter sharp. Because I've been patient, Sage. More patient than the Pack Council thinks I should be. But patience has limits. Before she could respond, the station door flew open and her son Asher burst out, his dark hair wild and his eyes blazing with fury that made her stomach drop. At 10, he was already showing signs of alpha dominance that terrified her, not because she was afraid of him, but because she knew what the pack would do if they suspected her Omega son carried alpha blood. Mama, Owen's crying again, Asher announced, his voice carrying the kind of command that shouldn't exist in a child. Those pack school jerks called him a bastard Omega spawn, and when I told them to stop, Mrs. Clearwater said I was being aggressive and maybe I should learn my place. The words hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Sage felt Riker's attention sharpen, his nostrils flaring slightly as he caught something in Asher's scent. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Asher, go check on your brother, she said quickly. And take Ivy with you. But Asher was staring at Riker now, his small body tense with the kind of territorial aggression that should have been impossible for an Omega's child. You're the new Alpha. I am. Riker's voice was carefully neutral. Are you here to kick us out like everyone says you will? Asher. Sage's voice cracked like a whip. Inside. Now. Her son held Riker's gaze for another heartbeat, a heartbeat too long for comfort, before nodding once and disappearing back into the station. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush her. Interesting boy, Riker said finally. He's protective of his family. Nothing more. Riker's pale eyes found hers again. Let's cut to the chase, Sage. This place is a disgrace to Pack lands. The equipment's failing, the building's a safety hazard, and frankly, it's an embarrassment. The Pack Council wants me to reclaim it for the Treasury. And you? What do you want? I want to give you a chance to prove that Garrett's faith in you wasn't misplaced. He pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photos, other gas stations, modern and gleaming. These are Pack standards. Working pumps, clean facilities, proper safety measures. You have 30 days to bring Moonrise up to code. 30 days. Sage's mouth went dry. The repairs alone would cost more than she made in 6 months. And if I can't? Then you forfeit the property to the Pack Treasury, and the Council will decide what to do with it. Probably sell it to Victor Ironwood. He's been very interested in acquiring it. Of course he had. Victor had expected to inherit everything when Garrett died, and finding out that the old Alpha had left his gas station to his illegitimate Omega daughter had been a blow to both his pride and his wallet. 30 days, Sage repeated. 30 days. Riker turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, I hope you succeed. Garrett saw something in you worth protecting. I'd hate to think he was wrong. He drove away in a cloud of dust, leaving Sage standing beside her smoking gas pump with the weight of impossible expectations pressing down on her shoulders. Through the station window, she could see her 3 children, Asher comforting a sniffling Owen while Ivy braided friendship bracelets that no Pack child would ever wear. They deserved better than this. They deserved a mother who could provide for them, protect them, give them the kind of life that didn't involve hiding their father's identity and pretending their older brother wasn't showing alpha traits that could get them all exiled. But deserving and getting were 2 different things, and Sage had learned that lesson the hard way. She looked at the broken pump, calculated the cost of repairs against her bank balance, and felt something cold and determined settle in her chest. 30 days wasn't much, but it was what she had. It would have to be enough. Chapter 2. Sage spent the rest of the day with her head buried in repair manuals and her phone pressed to her ear, calling every mechanic within 50 miles. The numbers that came back made her stomach churn. Even if she found someone willing to work on equipment this old, the cost would eat through what little savings she had and then some. Mama? Ivy appeared at her elbow, holding a plate of peanut butter sandwiches. You forgot to eat lunch. Thank you, baby. Sage accepted the sandwich even though her appetite had died along with the gas pump. Her daughter's worried eyes reminded her that no matter how bleak things looked, she had to keep it together. The twins were too young to understand the full scope of their situation, but they could sense her fear. Is the mean alpha man gonna take our home? Owen asked from the doorway, his lower lip trembling. No one's taking anything, Sage said firmly, pulling both twins close. We're morning stars, remember? We don't give up. It was a lie, but sometimes lies were kinder than truth. That evening, as she tucked the children into the small apartment above the station, Asher lingered by her side. Her eldest had always been too perceptive for his own good. I could help, he said quietly. I'm stronger than other kids my age. I could work on the pumps. Absolutely not. The sharpness in her voice made him flinch. You're 10 years old, Asher. Your job is to be a kid, not fix my problems. But if I'm really... You're not. She cut him off before he could finish the thought they'd been dancing around for months. You're my son, and you're perfect exactly as you are. Don't let anyone tell you different. He nodded, but she could see the questions burning in his dark eyes. Questions she couldn't answer without unraveling the careful lies that kept them safe. The next morning brought the rumble of a motorcycle engine that sounded expensive enough to power a small aircraft. Sage looked up from her coffee to see a man climbing off a sleek black bike that probably cost more than her annual income. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd raked his fingers through it and clothing that managed to look rugged and perfectly fitted at the same time. A lone wolf, her instincts whispered. But that was impossible. Lone wolves didn't just wander into Pack territory without permission, not unless they had a death wish. He approached the station with the easy confidence of a man who belonged wherever he chose to stand, and Sage found herself straightening her shoulders in response. She'd learned early that showing weakness to strange wolves was a mistake. "Morning," he said, his voice carrying a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Heard you might have some mechanical troubles." "Who's asking?" Knox Ravencrest. He extended a hand that looked like it could crush steel or handle delicate work with equal skill. "I'm between jobs, looking for some honest work. Figured a place like this might need an extra pair of hands." Sage stared at his offered hand without taking it. Everything about him screamed expensive, from his leather jacket to his perfectly maintained boots. The motorcycle alone was worth more than most pack members made in a year. "You don't look like you need work," she said bluntly. His smile was crooked and entirely too charming. "Looks can be deceiving. I've got skills with machinery, and I'm guessing you've got machinery that needs fixing. Seems like we could help each other out." "And what exactly would you want in return?" "Just what I said. Honest work for honest pay. Maybe a place to park my bike and catch some sleep if you've got the space." Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was a trap. Mysterious strangers didn't show up offering help right when you needed it most, not unless they wanted something you couldn't afford to give. But desperation made people do stupid things, and she was running short on options. "You know anything about gas pumps from the Stone Age?" "Lady, I can make anything with an engine purr like a kitten." The confidence in his voice made something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with hope and everything to do with the way his green eyes seemed to see straight through her defenses. 30 days, she heard herself saying. "That's all the time I've got to get this place running properly. Then we better get started." She led him to the smoking pump, watching as he circled it like a predator sizing up prey. His hands moved over the machinery with a familiarity that spoke of real experience, and when he popped the access panel, she caught herself admiring the way his muscles shifted under his shirt. "Focus, Sage. He's still a stranger who showed up at exactly the wrong time to be coincidence." "How bad is it?" she asked. "Bad, but not hopeless." He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that had appeared from nowhere. "You've got wiring that should have been replaced a decade ago, gaskets that are more wish than seal, and a pump mechanism that's held together by prayer and duct tape. But the bones are good. Give me a day to get the right parts, and I can have this running better than it has in years. Parts cost money. I know a guy who owes me a favor. Won't cost you anything but my time." That flutter in her chest turned into full-blown alarm bells. "Why would you do that?" For the first time since he'd arrived, Knox's easy confidence slipped. Something darker moved behind his eyes, pain, maybe, or regret. "Let's just say I know what it's like to fight for something everyone else thinks you don't deserve." Before she could ask what he meant, the station door flew open and the twins came barreling out, still in their pajamas and moving like puppies who'd spotted something interesting. "Mama, who's the man with the pretty bike?" Ivy demanded, while Owen hung back shyly. "This is Knox," Sage said carefully. "He's going to help fix our pumps." "Really?" Ivy's face lit up. "Are you staying for breakfast? Mama makes the best pancakes in the whole pack." "I don't want to impose." "It's no imposition," Sage found herself saying, even though feeding another mouth was the last thing her budget could handle. But something about the way he'd looked at her children, with genuine warmth instead of the dismissive tolerance most pack members showed her bastard Omega spawn, made her want to trust him. Knox's smile when he looked at the twins was different from the one he'd given her. Softer. Real. "In that case, I'd love some pancakes." Ivy cheered and grabbed Knox's hand, tugging him toward the station. "Come on. You can meet Asher too, but he's grumpy in the mornings." Sage followed, watching as Knox let himself be led by an 8-year-old girl who barely came up to his hip. Most wolves, especially strange males, would have established dominance immediately, put the children in their place. Knox just listened as Ivy chattered about everything from her favorite breakfast foods to the family of raccoons that lived behind the dumpster. Asher appeared in the kitchen doorway as they entered, and Sage felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. Her son took one look at Knox and went perfectly still in the way that always made her nervous. "Who are you?" Asher's voice carried a challenge that belonged to someone 10 times his age. "Knox Ravencrest." Knox's tone remained easy, but Sage caught the way his posture shifted, not threatening, but not backing down either. "You must be Asher. Your sister tells me you're the man of the house." "I am." Asher lifted his chin. "And I don't like strangers." "Asher," Sage warned, but Knox held up a hand. "That's smart," he said seriously. "A man should be protective of his family." "I respect that." The simple acknowledgement seemed to take some of the wind out of Asher's sails, though he continued to watch Knox with suspicious eyes throughout breakfast. The twins, meanwhile, chattered non-stop, asking Knox questions about his motorcycle and whether he'd ever seen a real cowboy and if he knew any good ghost stories. Knox answered each question with the kind of patience that spoke of experience with children, and by the time Sage flipped the last pancake, even Owen was giggling at Knox's story about a raccoon that had once stolen his entire dinner. "All right, you three need to get ready for school," Sage announced, ignoring the chorus of protests. "Mr. Ravencrest has work to do." "Knox," he corrected. "And they're welcome to watch if they want. I like an audience." "They have school," Sage said firmly, though she found herself reluctant to send the children away. It had been a long time since she'd seen them this animated around a stranger. After the kids left for school, Asher with one last warning glare at Knox, Sage led him back to the Pumps. She spent the morning watching him work, ostensibly to keep an eye on him but really because she couldn't look away. Knox moved around machinery like he spoke its language, his hands sure and gentle as he coaxed life back into systems that should have been dead years ago. "Where did you learn to do this?" she asked during a break. "Here and there." His tone was casual, but she caught the evasion. "I've always been good with my hands." "And the motorcycle?" "That's not exactly drifter transportation." Knox's hands stilled on the wrench he was holding. "Like I said, looks can be deceiving." "Meaning you're not really a drifter?" "Meaning I'm whoever I need to be to get by." The answer told her nothing and everything. Knox Ravencrest was running from something, the question was what, and whether it would follow him here. That evening brought the monthly pack meeting, held in the community center that had seen better decades. Sage usually avoided these gatherings, but Alpha Riker had made it clear that attendance wasn't optional. She sat in the back with the other Omegas and Lesser Wolves, trying to make herself invisible while the pack's power players held court up front. The meeting covered the usual business, territory patrols, upcoming celebrations, complaints about teenagers racing their cars through the residential district. Sage was counting the minutes until she could escape when Beta Victor Ironwood stood up. "I have something to say about the Moonrise situation," he announced, his voice carrying easily through the room. Sage's blood turned to ice. Victor was a handsome man in the way that belonged on political posters, all perfect teeth and practiced charm. He'd been pursuing her on and off for years, ever since his mate died in a car accident, and his interest had intensified after Garrett's death. She'd always assumed it was about the gas station, but the look in his eyes suggested something more personal. "As we all know, Alpha Garrett left the Moonrise gas station to Sage Morningstar," Victor continued, his tone reasonable and regretful. "While I respect our late Alpha's wishes, I think we can all agree that the situation has become untenable." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sage felt dozens of eyes turning her way, most of them unsympathetic. "The station is a disgrace to our territory," someone called out. "It's been falling apart for months." "She can't even keep the pumps running," added another voice. Victor raised his hand for silence. "Which is why I'm prepared to offer a solution that benefits everyone involved." Sage's stomach dropped as she realized where this was heading. "Sage Morningstar," Victor turned to face her directly. "I formally request your hand in mating. As my mate, you and your children would be provided for, and the gas station would receive the investment it needs to serve our pack properly." The silence that followed was deafening. Sage felt every eye in the room on her, waiting for her response to what Victor clearly thought was a generous offer. She could see the calculation in their faces, a nobody Omega getting a chance to mate with the pack's second-in-command was more than she deserved. "That's very thoughtful of you, Victor," she managed, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. "But I'll have to decline." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Decline?" Victor's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Perhaps you didn't understand. I'm offering to solve all your problems." "I understood perfectly." Sage stood up, ignoring the way her hands wanted to shake. "And my answer is no." "You're making a mistake," Victor said, his reasonable tone not quite hiding the threat underneath. "You have 30 days to bring that station up to standards. Even with my help, that would be challenging. Without it, I'll manage. Will you?" Victor's mask of politeness finally slipped. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're about to lose everything Garrett left you. Your children will be homeless, and you'll have no one to blame but your own pride." Several pack members nodded in agreement, and Sage heard whispered comments about ungrateful Omegas and knowing your place. The pressure of their disapproval pressed down on her like a physical weight, but she lifted her chin and met Victor's gaze squarely. "My children and I will be fine," she said clearly. "We don't need rescuing." She walked out before Victor could respond, her back straight and her head high until she was safely outside. Only then did she allow herself to lean against the building and take the shaking breath she'd been holding. She'd just made an enemy of the pack's most powerful beta, in front of witnesses who would be happy to spread the story. Victor Ironwood didn't take rejection well under the best circumstances, and public humiliation would only make him more dangerous. The walk back to the station felt like it took forever. When she finally reached the pumps, she was surprised to find Knox still there, working by the light of a portable lamp he'd produced from somewhere. He looked up as she approached, taking in her expression with those two knowing green eyes. "Rough meeting?" "You could say that." She didn't offer details, and he didn't ask. Another point in his favor. "Pumps are running," he said instead. "I'll need to order some parts for a permanent fix, but they'll hold for now." "Thank you." The words felt inadequate for what he'd accomplished in one day, but they were all she had. "Get some sleep," Knox said, wiping his hands clean. "Tomorrow we tackle the building repairs." He headed toward his motorcycle, and Sage found herself calling after him. "Knox? Where are you planning to sleep tonight?" He paused, his hand on the bike's handlebar. "I'll find somewhere. There's a cot in the storage room," she heard herself offering. "It's not much, but it's better than sleeping rough." For a moment, he looked like he might refuse. Then he nodded once. "I appreciate it." Sage went upstairs to check on the children, her mind spinning with everything that had happened. The twins were fast asleep, but Asher was sitting by his window, staring down at where Knox was securing his motorcycle. "He's not what he pretends to be," Asher said without turning around. "What do you mean?" "He smells wrong. Like he's hiding something important." Asher's young face was troubled. "But he doesn't smell dangerous. Not to us, anyway." Sage's son had inherited more than just physical strength from his unknown father. His instincts were razor-sharp, especially when it came to reading other wolves. If Asher said Knox was hiding something, he was probably right. "Do you want me to ask him to leave?" Asher considered this seriously. "No. I think he's here to help." "But Mama?" He finally turned to look at her. "Be careful. Whatever he's hiding, it's big." Sage kissed her son's forehead and tucked him into bed, but sleep eluded her. She lay awake listening to the sound of Knox moving around downstairs, wondering what secrets he carried and whether she was making another in a long line of mistakes. Around midnight, she heard the soft sound of the back door opening. Curious despite herself, she crept to the window and peered out into the moonlit lot behind the station. What she saw made her heart stop. Knox stood in the middle of the empty space, and as she watched, his human form began to shift and change. But this wasn't the familiar transformation she'd grown up witnessing. This was something else entirely. The wolf that emerged was massive, easily twice the size of any pack wolf she'd ever seen. Its fur was silver white, almost luminous in the moonlight, and when it lifted its head to scent the night air, she caught a glimpse of eyes that burned like green fire. This wasn't just a lone wolf who'd wandered into pack territory. This was something far more dangerous. And he was sleeping 20 feet below her children's beds. Chapter 3. Sage woke before dawn with Knox's silver wolf burned into her memory. She'd lain awake for hours trying to convince herself she'd imagined it, but her eyes didn't lie. Whatever Knox Ravencrest really was, he wasn't just some drifter looking for work. The question was what to do about it. She found him in the kitchen, coffee already brewing and breakfast laid out like he'd been doing it for years instead of days. He looked perfectly human in the morning light, rumpled dark hair, 5 o'clock shadow, green eyes that seemed to see everything. If she hadn't witnessed his transformation herself, she might have believed the illusion. "Morning," he said without turning around. "Sleep well?" "Like a baby." The lie came easily. "You?" "Better than I have in months." He handed her a steaming mug. "I was thinking we should tackle the interior today. That back wall's been bothering me." Sage nearly choked on her coffee. "What about it?" "The structure doesn't match the rest of the building. Like it was added later, maybe to hide something." Knox's eyes met hers over his mug. "Old buildings have secrets. Sometimes they're worth finding. Sometimes they're worth hiding," Sage thought, but she nodded. "Let's see what we can find." The twins left for school with their usual chatter, but Asher lingered by the door, his dark eyes fixed on Knox with that unsettling intensity that made Sage nervous. "You don't smell like yesterday," Asher said suddenly. Knox's hand stilled on his coffee mug. "People smell different in the morning." "Not like that." Asher stepped closer, and Sage saw Knox's shoulders tense slightly. "You smell like power. Like something big pretending to be small." "Asher," Sage warned, but her son wasn't finished. "I won't tell anyone," Asher said quietly. "But you should know that I can sense what you really are, even if I don't understand it yet." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crack the floor. Knox studied Asher with something like respect in his eyes. "And what do you think I am?" "Something that could protect us if you wanted to. Or destroy us if we crossed you." Asher's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "But you won't hurt us. You're here for a reason that has nothing to do with gas pumps." Knox was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded once. "You're going to be a hell of an alpha someday, kid." Asher flushed with pleasure at the acknowledgement before catching himself. "I'm not supposed to be an alpha. Mama says." "Your mama's protecting you," Knox said gently. "That's what good mothers do. But hiding what you are won't make it go away forever." Sage felt her world tilt sideways. Knox knew. Somehow, this stranger had seen through years of careful deception in a matter of days. "Asher, you need to get to school," she managed. Her son looked between them, clearly wanting to stay and hear more. But he nodded and shouldered his backpack. "Be careful today, Mama. And you too, Knox. I had bad dreams about angry wolves last night." After he left, Sage found herself alone with Knox and a dozen questions she didn't know how to ask. "He's special," Knox said before she could speak. "He's 10 years old. And carrying alpha genetics that are going to get stronger every year." Knox's voice was gentle but implacable. "You can't hide that forever, Sage. Sooner or later, the pack will figure it out. They'll exile us. Or worse. Not if someone powerful enough is standing with you." She stared at him, trying to read the promise in his eyes. "And would you stand with us?" "That depends on whether you trust me enough to let me." Trust. The word felt foreign on her tongue. She'd learned early that trusting the wrong person could destroy everything you cared about. "Let's start with the wall," she said instead. Knox nodded like he understood her deflection. "The wall it is." They worked in companionable silence for the first hour, Knox's hands moving over the old wood paneling with the kind of expertise that spoke of years of experience. His touch was sure and gentle, like he was reading the building's history through his fingertips. "You know a lot about construction for a drifter," Sage observed, watching him examine a section of wall that looked identical to every other section. "You pick things up when you move around a lot." His tone was casual, but she caught the evasion again. Different places, different skills needed to survive. Uh-huh. She handed him a pry bar. "And I suppose you learned electrical work, plumbing, and automotive repair the same way?" Knox's grin was quick and unrepentant. "What can I say? I'm a fast learner." "Right." Sage was starting to recognize his deflections. Every time she asked about his past, Knox gave her just enough information to seem forthcoming while actually revealing nothing. It was a skill that spoke of long practice. "Found something," Knox announced, his voice sharpening with interest. Sage looked over to see him running his fingers along what looked like a perfectly normal section of paneling. But when he pressed gently, a section of the wall swung inward on hidden hinges. "How did you know to do that?" "Lucky guess." But Knox's eyes were too knowing for luck. "Looks like your father left you more than a gas station." The hidden compartment was about 3 feet square and lined with metal. Inside, Sage found a manila envelope thick with documents, a small wooden box, and something that made her breath catch, a photograph of her father with a woman she didn't recognize, both of them standing in front of what looked like mining equipment. "That's not my mother," she said quietly. Knox looked over her shoulder at the photograph. "No, but she looks familiar. Like someone important." Sage opened the envelope with shaking hands. The documents inside made no sense at first: geological surveys, mineral rights claims, correspondence with something called the Whitmore Mining Consortium. But as she read, a picture began to emerge that turned everything she thought she knew about her inheritance upside down. "Knox," she breathed. "These surveys, they're not for this property. They're for the entire mountain range behind the Pack lands." "What kind of surveys?" "Rare earth minerals. According to this, there's a fortune buried under Silver Pine territory." She looked up at him, pieces clicking together in her mind. "That's why Garrett left me the station. It's not about the business, it's about the location. This property sits right on top of the richest vein." Knox was studying one of the documents, his expression unreadable. "When were these surveys done?" 3 years ago. Right around the time Victor started pushing for modernization of Pack infrastructure." Sage felt sick. "He knows, doesn't he? That's why he wants the property." "Why he wants me?" "Probably." Knox's voice was grim. "Question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before she could answer, the sound of children shouting erupted from outside. Sage's blood turned to ice as she recognized Asher's voice, raised in fury and something else, command that no 10-year-old should possess. They rushed outside to find chaos. Asher stood in front of the twins, who were pressed against the side of the building with tears streaming down their faces. Facing them were 3 teenage boys from the neighboring human town, led by Jake Morrison, the sheriff's son who'd been making life difficult for Pack kids for months. "I said leave them alone," Asher was saying, his young voice carrying an authority that made the hairs on Sage's arms stand up. "Or what, freak?" Jake sneered, but Sage noticed he'd taken a step back. "You gonna call your bastard mama to come save you?" That's when Asher's control snapped. Power rolled off the boy in waves that made Sage's wolf cower in submission. The human boys felt it too, their bravado faltering as some primal part of their brains recognized a predator. Jake went pale, his hands shaking as Asher took a step forward. "You will apologize to my sisters," Asher said, and his voice carried the kind of command that alphas spent years learning to project. "Then you will leave and never bother my family again." "Asher, no," Sage started forward, but Knox caught her arm. "Wait," he murmured. "Let's see how this plays out." Jake opened his mouth, probably to tell Asher where he could shove his orders. But the words that came out were different. I'm sorry. We didn't mean anything." The other boys nodded frantically, already backing toward their bikes. Within seconds, they were gone, pedaling away like demons were chasing them. Asher stood frozen, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. The power that had filled the air moments before was gone, leaving behind a confused little boy who didn't understand what had just happened. "Mama?" Ivy's voice was small and scared. Why did those boys act so funny? Before Sage could answer, the rumble of multiple engines announced the arrival of company she definitely didn't want. Victor Ironwood climbed out of a black SUV, followed by 3 members of the pack council. His face was set in lines of cold fury that made Sage's stomach clench. "Sage Morningstar," Victor's voice carried across the parking lot like a pronouncement. "We need to talk." "Victor." Sage stepped in front of her children, her mind racing. "What brings you by?" "Reports of your son terrorizing human children," Victor replied, his pale eyes fixed on Asher. "Mrs. Henderson saw the whole thing from her store. Said your boy used some kind of influence to make Jake Morrison and his friends apologize and run away." Sage felt the world narrow to a pinpoint. Mrs. Henderson was human, married to a pack member, and notorious for her hatred of anything she considered unnatural. If she'd witnessed Asher's display of alpha power and connected it to pack abilities. "Boys will be boys," Sage said carefully. "I'm sure it was just." "Don't." Victor's voice cut through her explanation like a blade. "We both know what this was. The question is what we're going to do about it." Council member Patricia Clearwater stepped forward, her expression sympathetic but firm. "Sage, honey, we understand this is difficult. But if Asher can't control his abilities, he's a danger to pack security. One human witness is bad enough. We can't risk exposure." "He's 10 years old," Sage said desperately. "Children have accidents. It won't happen again. Won't it?" Victor's smile was cold as winter. "Because from where I stand, it looks like your son is manifesting alpha traits that he shouldn't possess. Unless, of course, there's something about his parentage you'd like to share with the council?" The trap was elegant and deadly. If she denied Asher's alpha heritage, Victor would demand to know how an Omega's son could display such power. If she admitted the truth, she'd have to explain how an Omega had mated with an alpha outside the pack, a violation that could mean exile or death. "Asher is my son," she said quietly. "That's all that matters." "Is it?" Victor's voice was soft, dangerous. "Because I'm starting to think there are a lot of secrets in the Morningstar family. And secrets have a way of causing problems for everyone." That's when Knox stepped forward. Sage hadn't even realized he'd moved until he was beside her, his presence filling the space like he belonged there. But something was different about him now. The easygoing drifter was gone, replaced by something that made every wolf present take an involuntary step back. "Is there a problem here?" Knox's voice was conversational, but underneath it ran currents of power that made Sage's teeth ache. Victor's nostrils flared as he caught Knox's scent. "And you are?" "Knox Ravencrest." Knox's smile was pleasant and utterly terrifying. "I work for Ms. Morningstar." "I see." Victor's eyes narrowed. "And do you often involve yourself in pack business, Mr. Ravencrest?" "When pack business involves threatening my employer and her children?" "Absolutely." The air between the two men crackled with tension. Sage could feel the dominance battle building, could see Victor's wolf rising to meet the challenge. What she didn't expect was what happened next. Knox didn't shift. Didn't growl or show teeth or make any of the usual displays of alpha aggression. He simply looked at Victor, and power rolled off him in waves that made Sage's knees weak. Victor went white. Then, to Sage's shock, the beta wolf did something she'd never seen him do in her entire life. He lowered his eyes in submission. "This isn't over," Victor managed, his voice hoarse with the effort of speaking around his wolf's instinctive need to bare his throat. "No," Knox agreed pleasantly. "It's not. But it's over for today." Victor and the council members retreated to their vehicles without another word, leaving Sage standing in her parking lot with a man who just made the pack's second-in-command submit with a look. "Knox," she breathed. "What are you?" But before he could answer, Asher was there, tugging on Knox's shirt with desperate urgency. "You need to be careful," the boy whispered. "After what just happened, they're going to want to know everything about you. And there are people watching the station. I've seen them." "What people?" Knox's voice was sharp. "I don't know. But they smell like..." Asher wrinkled his nose. "Like money and secrets. And they've been watching us for days." Sage felt cold fingers of dread crawl up her spine. First the hidden documents revealing her property sat on a fortune in minerals. Then Victor's power play. Now mysterious watchers who smelled like money. "Knox, I think we need to..." She never finished the sentence. Knox moved faster than anything human had a right to, spinning her around and backing her against the station wall. His hands framed her face, his green eyes intense and focused entirely on her. "Trust me?" he asked quietly. Sage looked into his eyes and saw something that made her heart skip. Behind the mystery and the secrets and the impossible power, she saw a man who would protect her children with his life. A man who'd stepped between her family and danger without hesitation. "Yes," she whispered. Knox's kiss was gentle and fierce and everything she hadn't known she needed. His lips moved against hers with a certainty that spoke of claiming, of protection, of promises that went deeper than words. Sage felt herself melting into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he deepened the kiss. For one perfect moment, the world consisted of nothing but Knox's arms around her and the taste of forever on his lips. Then a car door slammed somewhere nearby, and reality crashed back. Knox pulled away slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. "We need to get you and the kid somewhere safe." "Why? What did you see?" Knox's expression was grim as he nodded toward the tree line across the highway. "Someone with a telephoto lens and a very expensive car. They've been photographing us for the last 10 minutes. Sage followed his gaze and caught a glimpse of sunlight reflecting off glass before a dark sedan pulled away from the trees and disappeared down the highway. "Who do you think?" "I don't know," Knox said. "But given what we found in that hidden compartment, I'd say you just became a very valuable piece of property to some very dangerous people." Sage looked at her children, who were watching the exchange with wide eyes, then at the gas station that had become the center of a mystery she didn't understand. One thing was becoming clear: whatever her father had left her, it was a lot more complicated than a failing business. And Knox Ravencrest, whoever he really was, might be the only thing standing between her family and forces she couldn't even name. "What do we do now?" she asked. Knox's smile was sharp as a blade. "Now we find out exactly what your father discovered, and why people are willing to kill for it." Chapter 4. The taste of Knox's kiss still lingered on Sage's lips as she watched the sedan disappear into the distance. Everything had changed in the space of a heartbeat: the discovery of her father's hidden documents, Asher's dangerous display of power, Knox's mysterious dominance over Victor, and now surveillance that spoke of threats she couldn't even comprehend. Inside, Knox said quietly, his eyes still scanning the tree line. "We need to talk." Sage gathered her children, noting how Asher stayed close to Knox while the twins flanked her like a protective guard. Even at 8 years old, they sensed the shift in the air, the way safety had become a fragile thing that could shatter without warning. Once they were back in the station, Knox turned to face her with an expression that was part regret, part determination, and entirely serious. "You want answers," he said. "And after what just happened, you deserve them. Who are you really?" The question came out steadier than she felt. Knox ran a hand through his dark hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. "My name is Knox Ravencrest." "That part's true. What I didn't tell you is that I'm the CEO of Ravencrest Industries, based out of Boston." Sage stared at him. "CEO of what?" "A multi-billion-dollar company that specializes in supernatural territory acquisitions and protection services." Knox's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather instead of dropping a bombshell that reframed everything she thought she knew about him. We help supernatural communities navigate human legal systems, protect valuable territories from exploitation, and occasionally, investigate when things go wrong. Billion with AB? Sage's voice came out higher than normal. With AB. And you're here because? Knox pulled out his phone and showed her a series of emails and documents. 3 months ago, my company received intelligence about a coordinated effort to expose and destabilize werewolf communities across the Pacific Northwest. The attacks weren't random. Someone was feeding detailed information about pack territories, leadership structures, and economic assets to anti-supernatural government factions. Sage felt the blood drain from her face. Anti-supernatural government factions? They exist, Knox said grimly. Most government officials don't know about us, but there are always some who do. Usually they're content to maintain the status quo. We stay hidden, they pretend we don't exist. But recently, someone's been providing them with detailed intelligence about pack territories that have valuable natural resources. And you think that someone is here? In Silverpine? I know it is. Knox's expression was granite hard. The intelligence we intercepted mentioned your gas station specifically. Someone's been feeding information about this property to people who want to use it to expose the entire pack. The pieces started clicking together in Sage's mind with sickening clarity. Victor. Victor Ironwood has been making regular trips to Seattle for the past 6 months, Knox confirmed. Trips that don't match any pack business we could identify. And his bank accounts show regular deposits from a shell company tied to a federal task force that officially doesn't exist. Sage sank into a chair, the implications hitting her like physical blows. He's been selling us out. Gets worse. According to our intelligence, Victor believed he would inherit your father's estate when Garrett died. When that didn't happen, he assumed you were just a temporary obstacle. But when you refused his proposal last night, he decided to escalate. Sage felt sick. That's why he brought the council today. He was trying to force me out before I could discover whatever Garrett left me. Speaking of which, Knox said, pulling out the safety deposit box key they'd found in the hidden compartment. I think it's time we found out exactly what your father wanted to protect. The drive to the bank felt like traveling through enemy territory. Knox kept checking his mirrors while Sage clutched the key and tried to process everything he'd told her. A billionaire CEO. Government conspiracies. Her own pack's beta selling them out to anti-supernatural forces. Why didn't you tell me who you were from the beginning? She asked as they pulled into the bank parking lot. Knox was quiet for a long moment. Because I needed to know if I could trust you. And because. He met her eyes. Because once people know what I'm worth, they see dollar signs instead of me. You looked at me like I was just a man who might be able to help. I hadn't realized how much I needed that. There was vulnerability in his voice that made her chest ache. And now? Now I know you're worth protecting, regardless of what your father left you. Knox's smile was soft and real. Though I have a feeling what he left you is going to change everything. The safety deposit box was larger than Sage had expected, and heavy enough that the bank employee had to help Knox lift it onto the table in the private viewing room. Inside, wrapped in waterproof packaging, were documents that made the ones they'd found at the station look like rough drafts. Jesus, Knox breathed, spreading out a detailed geological survey that looked like it had cost a fortune to produce. Sage, this isn't just about rare earth minerals. She looked over his shoulder at maps covered in technical notations and survey markers. What is it? Natural gas. A massive reserve that runs underneath most of the pack lands, with the primary access point directly beneath your gas station. Knox pointed to a section of the map highlighted in red. According to these surveys, we're talking about a reserve worth at least $200 million. $200 million. The number was so large it didn't feel real. That's why Garrett chose you, Knox continued, his voice full of dawning understanding. Not because you were his illegitimate daughter he finally decided to acknowledge. Because you were the only person he trusted to protect the pack's future. But I'm nobody, Sage protested. An Omega with 3 kids and no political power. You're exactly what the pack needs. Knox's eyes were intense as he met her gaze. Victor would have sold the rights to the highest bidder. Any of the other pack leaders would have made deals that benefited their families but left the pack vulnerable. But you? You'd use that wealth to protect your children and your community. Sage stared at the documents, trying to wrap her mind around the responsibility her father had placed on her shoulders. How did he even know about this? Knox pulled out another document, a letter written in Garrett's familiar handwriting. He commissioned these surveys when he started getting suspicious about Victor's activities. Look at the date. The surveys were dated 6 months before Garrett's death. 6 months before he'd rewritten his will to leave everything to the daughter he'd never publicly acknowledged. He knew, Sage whispered. He knew Victor was betraying the pack, and he knew about the natural gas. This whole thing was planned. Gets better, Knox said, though his expression suggested it actually got worse. Look at this. He handed her a copy of a contract between Victor Ironwood and something called Whitmore Energy Consortium. The contract was dated just 2 weeks ago, after Garrett's death but before Victor's public proposal. He was going to sell them the drilling rights, Sage realized. Whether I said yes to his proposal or not, he was planning to claim the property and sell it to these people. Who aren't just any energy company. Knox's voice was grim. Whitmore Energy is a front for the same federal task force that's been targeting supernatural communities. They're not interested in the gas, they're interested in having an excuse to bring heavy equipment and armed personnel onto pack lands. The trap was elegant and deadly. Expose the pack's supernatural nature, claim the territory was a national security threat, and seize some of the most valuable natural resources in the state. All while making Victor Ironwood a very wealthy man. We have to warn Alpha Riker, Sage said, reaching for her phone. Knox caught her wrist gently. We will. But first we need to get these documents somewhere safe. If Victor realizes we've found his smoking gun. The sound of screeching tires outside cut him off. Knox was moving before Sage could process what was happening, shoving her behind the heavy wooden table and pulling out a gun that definitely hadn't been there moments before. How many exits? He asked the terrified bank employee. Just the front and the emergency exit in the back, the woman stammered. Back exit. Now. Knox's voice carried the kind of authority that made people move without thinking. They made it halfway down the corridor before the front windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and smoke. Armed figures in tactical gear poured through the opening, their weapons trained on anything that moved. This way, Knox shouted, pushing Sage toward the emergency exit. They burst into the back alley to find more trouble waiting. 3 men in black tactical gear were positioned around Knox's motorcycle, their weapons raised. But these weren't just any mercenaries. Sage could smell the wrongness on them, the chemical scent of people who'd been dosed with suppressants to hide their supernatural nature. Knox Ravencrest, one of them called out. You're interfering with a federal investigation. Funny, Knox replied, his voice deadly calm. I don't see any badges. That's when the shooting started. Knox moved like liquid death, pulling Sage behind a dumpster as bullets chewed chunks out of the brick wall above their heads. His return fire was precise and devastating, dropping 2 of the mercenaries before they could find better cover. The documents, Sage gasped, clutching the geological surveys to her chest. Keep them safe, Knox ordered. We need to get back to your kids. They made it to Knox's motorcycle through a hail of gunfire, Knox's enhanced reflexes and supernatural speed the only things keeping them alive. The bike roared to life just as more vehicles screeched into the alley. The ride back to the gas station was a nightmare of high-speed chases and near-miss collisions. Knox drove like a man possessed, weaving through traffic while Sage held on and prayed they'd make it back before the mercenaries found another way to the station. They were too late. Smoke was rising from the direction of Moonrise gas station when they crested the hill, and Sage's heart stopped as she saw flames licking at the building she'd called home for 6 months. The kids, she breathed. Knox pushed the motorcycle faster than anything had a right to go on these winding mountain roads. They skidded into the parking lot to find chaos. The gas station was burning, pack members were scattered around the lot in various states of shock and injury, and Alpha Riker was standing in the middle of it all with blood on his shirt and fury in his eyes. Sage. Ivy's voice cut through the noise, and Sage turned to see her children huddled behind one of the pack's SUVs. All three were dirty and scared but unharmed, and the relief almost brought her to her knees. What happened? Knox demanded as they reached Riker. Armed attack about 20 minutes ago, the Alpha replied grimly. They came in fast and hard, looking for something specific. When they didn't find it, they torched the place. The children? Asher got them out, Riker said, and there was something like respect in his voice. Kids showed more alpha instincts in 5 minutes than most wolves develop in years. He organized the evacuation and held the attackers off until we could respond. Sage looked at her 10-year-old son with a mixture of pride and terror. Asher was standing protectively in front of his sisters, his young face set in lines of determination that belonged on someone much older. "Mama," he said when he saw her. They were looking for papers. Important papers about the gas station. I heard them talking. Did you get a look at them? Knox asked. Asher nodded. Some were Pack. Some weren't. His dark eyes found Knox's. And some smelled like the beta. Victor. Of course. Where is Victor now? Sage asked. Riker's expression darkened. Gone. Left about 10 minutes before the attack with some story about emergency council business in the next county. He looked between Sage and Knox. I'm starting to think there are things about my beta I should have known. More than you can imagine, Knox said. But right now we need to get Sage and her children somewhere safe. This attack was just the beginning. As if summoned by his words, the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. Black aircraft with no visible markings circled the gas station like mechanical vultures. Federal Task Force, Knox said grimly. They're not even pretending to be subtle anymore. What do we do? Sage asked, clutching the documents that had nearly gotten them killed. Knox looked at the burning building, the circling helicopters, and the pack members who were starting to understand that their safe little territory had become a battleground. We run, he said simply. Deep into the wilderness where their technology can't follow. And we figure out how to stop this before they destroy everything you care about. The children. Come with us. All of them. Knox's voice was absolute. Because after what just happened, nowhere in Pack territory is safe anymore. Sage looked at her burning home, her terrified children, and the man who'd stepped into her life claiming to be a drifter but who was actually a billionaire with the resources to fight back against forces she couldn't even name. How do we even begin to fight this? Knox's smile was sharp as a blade and twice as dangerous. We start by making them realize they've picked a fight with the wrong wolves. Alpha Riker stepped forward, his pale eyes hard as winter. You have Pack support, Sage. Whatever your father saw in you, whatever he left you to protect, we'll help you protect it. The helicopters were circling lower now, and Sage could see figures rappelling down ropes toward the burning station. Time was running out. Pack what you can carry, Knox ordered. We leave in 5 minutes. Sage gathered her children and what few belongings they could manage, her mind spinning with everything that had changed in the space of a few hours. This morning she'd been a struggling single mother trying to save a failing gas station. Tonight she was the keeper of secrets worth hundreds of millions of dollars, being hunted by forces that wanted to destroy her entire community. But as she watched Knox coordinate with Riker to organize the evacuation, as she saw Asher take charge of his younger siblings with competence that spoke of true alpha potential, as she felt the Pack rally around her family despite years of them being outsiders, Sage realized something important. She wasn't running away from a fight. She was running toward one. And with Knox Ravencrest at her side and $200 million worth of leverage in her hands, she had a chance of winning. The helicopters touched down as they disappeared into the forest, leaving behind the burning remains of Moonrise gas station and stepping into a wilderness that would either hide them long enough to plan their counterattack or become their grave. Chapter 5. The abandoned safe house sat like a forgotten secret in the heart of Silverpine territory, hidden so deep in the old-growth forest that even most Pack members had forgotten it existed. Alpha Riker had pressed the key into Sage's hand as they'd fled the burning gas station, his pale eyes holding promises of protection and grim determination. Built during the territorial wars in the 50s, he'd explained tersely. Fully stocked, defensible, and warded against electronic surveillance. You'll be safe there while we figure out our next move. Safe. The word felt foreign as Sage watched Knox sweep the small cabin for threats, his movements efficient and deadly serious. Nothing about their situation felt safe. Not the way government helicopters had circled their burning home, not the memory of armed mercenaries with weapons trained on her children, and definitely not the way her heart raced every time Knox's green eyes met hers. The cabin was larger than it appeared from outside, with 3 small bedrooms, a main living area centered around a stone fireplace, and a kitchen that looked like it hadn't been updated since the Eisenhower administration. But it was clean, dry, and stocked with enough supplies to last weeks if necessary. "Mama, I'm hungry," Owen whispered, pressing close to her side with the kind of clingy behavior that meant he was more scared than he wanted to admit. "I'll make dinner," Sage said, stroking his dark hair. "Why don't you and Ivy get settled in that back bedroom? Asher can help me in the kitchen." But Asher was standing by the window, his young face set in lines of concentration that made him look far older than his 10 years. "They're still out there," he said quietly. "I can hear the helicopters in the distance." Knox joined him at the window, and Sage noticed how naturally her son gravitated toward the older man. Despite all his suspicions, Asher seemed to trust Knox in a way that both warmed and worried her. "They'll keep searching for a while," Knox said. "But they won't find us here. The wards on this place are old magic, the kind that makes technology malfunction." "What happens when they give up searching?" Asher asked. Knox's expression darkened. "Then they'll try a different approach." Dinner was a subdued affair of canned soup and crackers, with the twins exhausted enough to fall asleep at the table. Sage carried them to the back bedroom, tucking them in with blankets that smelled like cedar and old pack magic. When she returned to the main room, she found Knox feeding logs to the fire while Asher sat nearby, supposedly reading but actually watching the older man with that unsettling intensity. "Asher, you should get some sleep too," Sage said gently. "I'm not tired." But his eyelids were heavy, and she could see the toll the day had taken on him. "Go on," Knox said, not looking up from the fire. "I'll keep watch. Your family's safe here." Asher nodded reluctantly and headed toward the smaller bedroom he'd claimed for himself. But he paused in the doorway, looking back at Knox with an expression Sage couldn't read. "You're not telling us everything," the boy said quietly. "About why you're really here." Knox's hand stilled on the poker he'd been using to adjust the logs. "What makes you say that?" "You smell like secrets. Like guilt." Asher's dark eyes were far too knowing. "But you also smell like someone who cares about us. I'm trying to figure out which one is stronger." The silence that followed was heavy enough to suffocate. Knox looked at Asher for a long moment, and Sage saw something like pain flash across his features. "The truth is complicated," Knox said finally. "Most important things are." Asher disappeared into his room, leaving Sage alone with Knox and a dozen questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. Knox stood slowly, his broad shoulders tense as he turned to face her. In the firelight, he looked like something out of a fairy tale, too handsome to be real, too powerful to be entirely safe. "He's right," Knox said quietly. "About the secrets." Sage felt something cold settle in her stomach. "What kind of secrets?" Knox ran a hand through his dark hair, and she recognized the gesture as one he made when he was trying to find words for something difficult. "When I first came to Silverpine, it wasn't because I'd heard you needed help," he said. "It was because Ravencrest Industries had identified your property as a potential acquisition target." The words hit her like physical blows. Acquisition target. The intelligence about federal interest in PAC territories didn't come from nowhere. "My company monitors supernatural communities that might be at risk, partly to protect them but partly to..." He paused, clearly struggling. "To identify opportunities." Opportunities. Sage's voice was flat, but inside she felt something precious beginning to crack. You mean places you could buy cheap before anyone realized their real value? Yes. The word was barely a whisper. So when you showed up offering to fix my pumps, that was what? Research? Due diligence? Knox's green eyes were full of something that looked like pain. Initially, yes. The plan was to assess the property, figure out what you knew about its value, and make an offer you couldn't refuse. Sage felt the bottom drop out of her world. Everything, his kindness to her children, his protection, the way he'd made her feel like she mattered, all of it had been a lie. What changed? The question came out steadier than she felt. You did. Knox stepped toward her, his voice gaining strength. Everything changed the moment I saw you trying to fix that damn pump with duct tape and determination. Changed when I watched you put your children's needs ahead of your own every single time. Changed when I realized you weren't some opportunistic omega who'd conned an alpha out of his estate. You were exactly what Garrett saw in you. Which was someone worth protecting. Someone who'd use power responsibly instead of for personal gain. Knox's eyes were intense as they met hers. Someone who made me want to be better than I was. Sage stared at him, trying to separate truth from manipulation. And your company? Do they know about your change of heart? Knox's expression darkened. My board of directors thinks I'm here conducting a routine acquisition survey. They expect me to close the deal and move on to the next opportunity. But you're not going to do that. No. Knox's voice was absolute. I'm going to help you protect what your father left you, even if it costs me everything. The declaration hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure she was brave enough to cross. Part of her wanted to rage at him for the deception, for making her trust him when he'd come here to exploit her. But a larger part recognized the pain in his eyes, the way he'd put himself between her family and danger without hesitation. Knox, she started, but he was already moving toward her. I know I should have told you sooner, he said, his hands framing her face with a gentleness that made her breath catch. I know you have every right to hate me for not being honest from the beginning. But Sage, what I feel for you, what I feel for your children, that's real. That's the most real thing I've ever experienced. She could see the truth in his eyes, could feel it in the way his hands trembled slightly against her skin. Whatever his original intentions, Knox Ravencrest was a man who'd found something worth changing for. Show me, she whispered. Knox's kiss was different this time. Desperate and hungry and full of unspoken promises. His lips moved against hers with a certainty that spoke of need and claiming in something deeper than desire. Sage felt herself melting into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as he deepened the kiss. Sage, he murmured against her lips, her name a prayer and a promise. She responded by pulling him closer, pouring months of loneliness and fear and desperate hope into the kiss. Knox's arms came around her like bands of steel, holding her against him like she was precious and fragile and worth protecting with his life. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Knox rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly. I know it's too soon and I know I don't deserve you, but I needed you to know. Sage's heart stumbled over the words she'd never expected to hear from someone like him. Knox. You don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know that whatever happens next, what I feel for you is real. She was about to tell him that she felt the same way, that somewhere between his first smile and his willingness to stand against Victor Ironwood, she'd fallen harder than she'd ever thought possible. But before she could speak, a small voice cut through the moment like a blade. So this was all fake. They sprang apart to find Asher standing in the doorway to his bedroom, his dark eyes blazing with betrayal and something that looked dangerously like the kind of alpha rage that could tear apart more than just furniture. Asher, Sage started, but her son cut her off. I heard everything, he said, his young voice carrying the kind of controlled fury that made the air around him crackle with power. About how he came here to buy us out. About how his company wanted to steal our land. About how this was all just some business deal. That's not, Knox began. Don't. Asher's voice cracked like a whip, and Knox actually took a step back. Don't lie to me anymore. I trusted you. I thought you were here to help us, but you were just here to take everything away. Asher, it's more complicated than that, Sage said desperately. Is it? Her son's eyes found hers, and she saw the hurt beneath the anger. Or is it exactly as simple as it sounds? He came here to steal from us, and when that didn't work, he decided to steal you instead. The words hit like physical blows, partly because there was enough truth in them to sting. I never meant for this to happen, Knox said quietly. But it did happen. Asher's control was slipping, power rolling off him in waves that made the windows rattle. And now we're supposed to trust you to protect us from the same people you work for? Before Knox could respond, the sound of vehicles in the distance made them all freeze. Multiple engines, moving fast and with purpose. Knox was at the window in seconds, his expression grim as he peered through the curtains. Government vehicles. At least 6 of them, headed this way. They found us? Sage felt panic rising in her throat. No. But they don't need to find us to destroy us. Knox's voice was tight with anger. They're heading for Pack lands. This is about to become a siege. Sage's phone buzzed with an incoming call from Alpha Riker. She answered with shaking hands. Sage, you need to know what's happening. Riker's voice was tight with fury. Victor Ironwood has filed formal petitions with both the Pack Council and the Human Family Court system. He's claiming you're an unfit mother and requesting emergency custody of your children. He can't do that. He's using today's attack as evidence that you've put the children in danger. Claims that your reckless decisions have made you a threat to their safety. Riker's voice was grim. Worse, he's also petitioned the council to declare you mentally incompetent to manage Garrett's estate. If both petitions are approved, he gets custody of the kids and control of everything your father left you. Sage felt the world tilt sideways. On what grounds? He's claiming you've been manipulated by an outsider with questionable motives. There was a pause. Sage, Victor knows about Knox's real identity. He knows about Ravencrest Industries and their original interest in your property. Sage's eyes found Knox's, and she saw her own horror reflected there. How long do I have? She asked. Emergency hearing is set for tomorrow morning. Both councils, Pack and Human. If you don't appear to defend yourself, they'll rule in Victor's favor by default. And if I do appear? Then you'll be walking into a trap. The government task force is working with Victor. They're planning to use the custody hearing as an excuse to take you into federal custody. Sage closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in from all sides. Appear at the hearing and risk federal imprisonment. Don't appear and lose her children forever. There has to be another option, she said. Maybe. But you'd need someone with serious legal and political connections to fight this kind of coordinated attack. Someone with resources that could match what they're throwing at you. Sage opened her eyes and looked at Knox, who was watching her with an expression of grim understanding. I have to go, she told Riker, and ended the call. The silence in the cabin was deafening. Knox stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense with controlled anger. Asher remained in the doorway, his young face a mask of betrayal and confusion. You heard, she asked Knox. Enough. His voice was rough. Sage, I can fight this. Ravencrest Industries has legal teams that specialize in exactly this kind of situation. I can. No. The word came out harsher than she intended. You've done enough. Knox turned to face her, and she saw something die in his green eyes. Sage, please. Let me help. Help? She felt months of fear and desperation crystallizing into anger. You mean the way you helped when you came here to steal my land? The way you helped when you lied to my children? The way you helped when your company's investigation put a target on our backs? That's not fair. Isn't it? Sage felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Everything that's happened, Victor's betrayal, the government interest, the attack on our home, it all started when you arrived. The conspiracy existed long before I got here. But you made it worse. Your presence here gave Victor the excuse he needed to escalate. Your company's interest proved there was something worth fighting for. Sage's voice was steady, but inside she felt like she was bleeding. I want you to leave. Knox went very still. Sage. I want you to leave my territory and stay away from my family. Each word felt like swallowing glass, but she forced them out. We were surviving just fine before you showed up. We'll survive after you're gone. You can't fight this alone. I've been alone my whole life. I can handle being alone now. Knox stared at her for a long moment, and she saw the exact moment he realized she meant it. His expression closed off, becoming the polite mask of a businessman conducting an unpleasant transaction. If that's what you want. It is. Knox nodded once, then gathered his jacket and headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the handle, looking back at her with eyes that held too much pain. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I meant every word I said about loving you. Then he was gone, leaving Sage alone with her children and the crushing weight of choices that had no right answers. She lasted exactly 4 hours. 4 hours of pacing the small cabin while her children slept. 4 hours of trying to convince herself she'd made the right choice. 4 hours of watching the shadows outside and knowing that somewhere in the darkness, government agents and pack traders were planning her family's destruction. When her phone rang again, this time with news that Victor had accelerated the custody hearing to 6 a.m., she finally admitted the truth. She needed help. Real help, from someone with resources that matched the forces arrayed against her. She needed Knox. Sage dialed his number with shaking fingers, praying he would answer despite the way she'd thrown his love back in his face. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then a voice answered that wasn't Knox's. Ms. Morningstar, the crisp female voice was professionally polite. This is Margaret Whitfield, Director of Operations for Ravencrest Industries. I'm afraid Mr. Ravencrest is unavailable at the moment. Sage's blood turned to ice. Where is he? In a board meeting, addressing his costly obsession with your small pack. The board has grown concerned about the resources he's been dedicating to what should have been a simple acquisition. They've asked him to explain his continued interest in a property and situation that have proven far more trouble than they're worth. Let me talk to him. I'm afraid that's not possible. Mr. Ravencrest's personal involvement in this matter has become a liability to the company. The board is considering whether his judgment has been compromised. The words hit Sage like physical blows. Knox was being punished for trying to help her. His own company was turning against him because he'd chosen her family over profit. Ms. Morningstar? Margaret Whitfield's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. The board would like to extend an offer. Ravencrest Industries is prepared to purchase your property for fair market value, significantly more than it was worth before recent complications. You could relocate your family somewhere safe, away from all this unpleasantness. And if I refuse? Then you'll face tomorrow's custody hearing alone, against forces that have had months to prepare their attack. The woman's voice was cold as winter. Mr. Ravencrest cannot help you now, even if he wanted to. He's fighting for his own professional survival. The line went dead, leaving Sage staring at her phone and facing the terrible truth. She'd sent away the one person who could have helped her, and now it was too late to get him back. In 6 hours, she would face a custody hearing that would determine whether she kept her children or lost everything that mattered. And she would face it alone. Chapter 6. The attack came at dawn, when the forest was still wrapped in mist and Sage's children were barely awake. She'd been standing at the cabin window, watching the sunrise and trying to convince herself that somehow, everything would work out, when the first tranquilizer dart shattered the glass beside her head. Kids, she screamed, spinning toward the bedrooms as black-clad figures burst through the front door. But it was too late. The government agents moved with military precision, their weapons trained and their movements coordinated. Sage caught a glimpse of Asher trying to shield the twins before a dart caught her in the shoulder, sending liquid fire through her veins. The last thing she saw before consciousness faded was Victor Ironwood standing in the doorway, his handsome face wearing an expression of cold satisfaction. Take them to the facility, she heard him say. It's time to show the world what monsters really look like. Sage woke to the taste of silver in her mouth and the sound of her children crying. She was in some kind of medical facility, sterile white walls, fluorescent lighting, and the antiseptic smell that spoke of government efficiency. Her wrists were bound with silver-laced restraints that burned against her skin, making her wolf whimper and retreat deep inside her mind. "Mama?" Ivy's voice was small and scared, coming from somewhere to her left. Sage turned her head, fighting through the lingering effects of whatever they'd drugged her with. Her children were in similar restraints, sitting on metal chairs that had been bolted to the floor. Asher's dark eyes were blazing with fury, but the silver was clearly affecting him too. His usual aura of barely contained power was muted, suppressed. "I'm here, baby," Sage managed, her voice hoarse. "Are you hurt?" "No," Asher said through gritted teeth. "But they took blood samples. Lots of them." "Genetic testing," Victor Ironwood's voice cut through the room like a blade. Sage looked up to see him entering through a door she hadn't noticed, flanked by two men in suits who radiated the kind of cold professionalism that belonged to federal agencies. Victor looked different. Gone was the charming beta who'd courted pack approval. In his place stood someone harder, more calculating. "Hello, Sage," Victor said, pulling up a chair and sitting down like they were having tea instead of conducting an interrogation. "I hope you're comfortable. We have a lot to discuss." "Where are we?" "A federal facility that officially doesn't exist, investigating supernatural threats that officially don't exist either." Victor's smile was sharp. "Don't worry, your accommodations are temporary. Once we've gathered the evidence we need, you and your children will be relocated somewhere more permanent." "Evidence of what?" "That werewolves exist. That they've been hiding among human populations for decades. That they pose a clear and present danger to national security." Victor leaned forward, his pale eyes gleaming. "You're going to help me prove all of that?" Sage felt ice form in her veins. "I won't help you expose the pack. You don't have a choice. Your children's DNA samples are already being processed. The genetic markers that prove supernatural heritage will be all over the news by tomorrow morning." Victor's voice was conversational, like he was discussing the weather. "The question is whether you cooperate and make this easier on your family, or force us to take more aggressive measures." "You're talking about destroying everything," Sage said desperately. "The pack, the community, innocent families." "I'm talking about evolution," Victor cut her off. "Humans deserve to know what's sharing their world. And I deserve to profit from that knowledge." "Profit?" Victor gestured to one of the suited men. "Meet Agent Harrison, from a very special government task force. They've been monitoring supernatural populations for years, waiting for the right opportunity to bring them into the light. I've provided that opportunity, and in exchange, I get immunity, protection, and a very generous consulting fee." Agent Harrison stepped forward, his expression as cold as his voice. "Mr. Ironwood has been invaluable in identifying high-value supernatural assets and territories. The mineral rights alone will fund our operations for decades." The mineral rights. Of course. This wasn't just about exposing werewolves, it was about stealing the fortune that lay beneath pack lands. "The natural gas reserves," Sage said, understanding flooding through her. "Worth over $200 million, Victor confirmed. Money that should have been mine when Garrett died. Money that will be mine once you're declared an enemy of the state and your assets are seized. Garrett never intended for you to inherit anything. Garrett was a sentimental fool who let emotion cloud his judgment." Victor's mask of civility slipped, revealing the bitter anger beneath. "He chose a bastard Omega over his own son." "You're not his son," Sage said quietly. Victor's face went white. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Sage looked him in the eyes, pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known existed suddenly clicking together. "You're not Garrett's biological son, are you? That's why you were so desperate to marry me, why you needed legal claim to the inheritance. Because blood matters in pack law, and you don't have the right blood." The silence that followed was deafening. Agent Harrison was looking between them with sharp interest, clearly filing away information for later use. "Shut up," Victor said, his voice deadly quiet. "That's why he chose me," Sage continued, the truth crystallizing in her mind. "Not because I was his illegitimate daughter," he finally decided to acknowledge. "Because I'm his legitimate heir." "You're nobody," Victor snarled. "An Omega who spread her legs for some nameless Alpha and got knocked up." "No." Sage's voice was steady, certain. "I'm Alpha Garrett Morningstar's daughter. His blood daughter. Which means Asher is the true Alpha heir," Asher finished quietly, his young voice carrying a weight that made everyone in the room go still. Agent Harrison was taking notes now, his expression intensely focused. "This is fascinating. You're saying there's a genetic component to your leadership hierarchy?" "Ancient pack law," Sage said, her mind racing as she pieced together her father's long game. "Territorial mineral rights can only be claimed by a true-born Alpha bloodline. Victor could marry me, could even force me to sign over the property, but he could never legally claim the mineral rights because he doesn't carry Alpha genetics." "But your son does," Agent Harrison said with scientific interest. "My son does," Sage confirmed. "Which makes him the rightful heir to everything Garrett left behind." Victor was on his feet now, his composure completely shattered. "You think that matters? You think anyone's going to care about pack law once the world knows what you really are? Once humans see you shift into monsters, once they understand the threat you represent?" "Maybe not," Sage said. "But it means Garrett was smarter than any of us realized. He knew you were planning to betray the pack. He knew you'd been feeding information to federal agents. So he made sure the one thing you really wanted, the mineral rights that would make you rich, would always be out of your reach." Agent Harrison was watching this exchange with the fascination of a scientist observing an experiment. "Mr. Ironwood, you didn't mention this genetic complication in your briefings." "It doesn't matter," Victor said desperately. "The mineral rights won't mean anything once supernatural communities are exposed and disbanded. The government will seize all their assets." "Actually," Agent Harrison said thoughtfully, "genetic proof of inherited leadership could be very valuable. Imagine the research possibilities. The breeding programs we could develop." Sage felt sick. They weren't just talking about exposure, they were talking about treating her people like livestock. "Mama," Ivy's voice was barely a whisper. "Mama, can you hear me?" Sage looked at her daughter, confused. Ivy's lips hadn't moved, but she could swear she'd heard her voice. "Don't look at me," Ivy's voice came again, clear as day in Sage's mind. "They don't know about my gift yet. Owen and I have been talking while they've been focused on you and Asher." Psychic communication. Sage nearly gasped aloud as she realized what was happening. Ivy had inherited some kind of telepathic ability, something rare even among werewolves. "Owen says he can get us out of the restraints," Ivy continued silently. "But we need a distraction. Something big enough to draw their attention." Sage glanced at her youngest son and saw him watching her with eyes that held far too much understanding for an 8-year-old. As she watched, Owen's hand began to shimmer around the edges, becoming translucent. Partial phasing. Another rare gift, the ability to shift specific body parts into an immaterial state. Owen was making his hand pass through the silver restraints like they were made of air. When? Sage thought back to Ivy, hoping the connection worked both ways. "Soon. But Mama, there's something else." I can hear the man in the suit thinking. "He's planning to hurt Asher if you don't cooperate." "Really hurt him?" Ice formed in Sage's veins. "How long do we have?" "Not long. They're bringing in more doctors. People who want to cut Asher open to see how his alpha genetics work." Rage filled Sage like wildfire. No one was going to hurt her children. Not Victor, not the government, not anyone. "Tell Owen to get ready," she thought to Ivy. "And tell Asher to prepare for a fight." Meanwhile, Victor was still arguing with Agent Harrison about protocols and profit margins, his desperation making him increasingly agitated. Sage could see the cracks in his composure widening, and she decided to drive a wedge into them. Tell me something, Victor, she said loudly enough to interrupt their conversation. When did you first contact the federal task force? Before Garrett died, or after? Victor's face flushed. That's none of your business. I'm betting it was before. I'm betting you've been feeding them information about Pac territories for years, waiting for the right moment to cash in. Sage's voice was steady, implacable. The question is whether Garrett knew. Garrett was an old fool. Garrett was the smartest alpha this pack ever had. He knew exactly what you were, which is why he made sure you'd never get what you really wanted. Sage met Victor's eyes squarely. He played you, Victor. For years, he let you think you were his heir while he planned to leave everything to someone who would actually protect the pack instead of selling it out. Shut up. Victor lunged toward her, his control finally snapping completely. That's when Owen struck. Her youngest son's entire body shimmered and phased, allowing him to slip through his restraints like they were made of mist. He rematerialized behind Agent Harrison, his small hands grabbing the man's weapon before anyone could react. Nobody move. Owen's voice was high and scared, but his grip on the gun was steady. In the chaos that followed, Ivy used her psychic abilities to coordinate their escape. Now, Asher, she projected to her brother. Asher's silver restraints, weakened by Owen's phasing abilities when he'd touched them earlier, snapped under the boy's enhanced strength. Power rolled off the 10-year-old in waves that made the fluorescent lights flicker and the metal chairs groan. You will not hurt my family, Asher said, his young voice carrying the kind of alpha command that made grown werewolves submit. Even the humans in the room felt it. Agent Harrison froze mid-reach for backup weapon, his face going pale as his hindbrain recognized a predator. Victor stumbled backward, his own wolf cowering in submission despite his human form. How? Agent Harrison gasped. Alpha genetics, Sage said grimly as Owen freed her from her restraints with another application of his phasing gift. The real thing, not the watered-down version you've been studying. Alarms were blaring now, the sound of running feet echoing from the corridors outside. They had minutes, maybe less, before reinforcements arrived. Ivy, can you find us a way out? Sage asked. Her daughter's eyes went distant for a moment. There's an emergency exit 2 floors up. But Mama, there are more agents coming. Lots of them. Then we better move fast. They fought their way through the facility like a family of avenging spirits. Asher's alpha power cleared their path, his commands forcing human guards to stand aside or flee. Owen phased through locked doors to open them from the other side, while Ivy used her psychic abilities to anticipate threats and guide them away from danger. But it was Sage who led them, her maternal instincts and pack training combining to create a force of nature that nothing could stop. No one was going to hurt her children. No one was going to use them as experiments or weapons or proof of concept for some government program. They reached the emergency exit to find it blocked by a squad of heavily armed agents in tactical gear. For a moment, Sage thought they were trapped. Then the sound of an explosion echoed from somewhere below them, followed by the distinctive roar of a motorcycle engine being pushed to its limits. Knox, Asher breathed, and despite everything that had happened between them, Sage felt her heart leap with hope. The agents blocking their exit were distracted by whatever chaos Knox was creating on the lower levels. It was the opening they needed. Together, Sage said, gathering her children close. Whatever happens, we stay together. They burst through the emergency exit and into the dawn light, free but far from safe. Behind them, the government facility erupted in alarms and shouting voices. Ahead of them lay the wilderness that had sheltered their people for generations. Which way? Ivy asked, her psychic senses stretched to their limits. Before Sage could answer, the distinctive sound of Knox's motorcycle echoed from the parking area below. He was coming for them, despite everything that had happened, despite the way she'd driven him away. This way, she said, leading her children toward the sound of salvation. They were far from safe, but they were free. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Sage allowed herself to hope that they might actually survive what was coming next. Behind them, Victor Ironwood's voice carried across the morning air, raised in fury and desperation. Find them. They're the key to everything. But Sage and her children were already disappearing into the forest, carrying with them the secrets that could either save their people or destroy them forever. Chapter 7. The sound of Knox's motorcycle cut through the morning air like a war cry, but he wasn't alone. As Sage led her children through the trees toward the parking area, she heard other engines, dozens of them, creating a symphony of mechanical thunder that spoke of reinforcements and hope. Knox appeared first, his bike sliding to a stop in a spray of gravel as his green eyes found hers across the distance. Relief flooded his features, followed immediately by the kind of controlled rage that made the air around him crackle with power. "Are you hurt?" he called, dismounting and moving toward them with predatory grace. "We're okay," Sage replied, though she could see the lie in her children's faces. They might be physically unharmed, but what they'd endured in that facility had left marks that wouldn't show up on any medical exam. Behind Knox, more motorcycles roared into the parking area, their riders dismounting with military precision. These weren't pack members, Sage could tell by their scents and the way they moved. They were something else, something powerful and organized. "East Coast Wolves," Knox explained, noting her confusion. "My brother's pack. When I told them what was happening here, they volunteered to help." A man who looked like Knox's darker, more dangerous twin stepped forward. Where Knox projected controlled power, this man radiated the kind of lethal authority that made smart people step back and keep their mouths shut. "This is my brother, Roman Ravencrest," Knox said. "Alpha of the Boston Territory." Roman's pale eyes, so similar to Knox's but colder, swept over Sage and her children with calculating assessment. "So you're the Omega who's turned my brother's world upside down." "I'm the Alpha who's about to turn everyone's world upside down," Sage corrected, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Roman's eyebrows rose, but before he could respond, the government facility behind them erupted in chaos. Alarms blared, vehicles roared to life, and armed agents poured out of the building like angry ants from a disturbed hill. "Time to go," Roman said grimly. "My wolves have the perimeter secured, but that won't last long." "No." Sage's voice cut through the noise with unexpected authority. "We're not running anymore." Knox spun to face her. "Sage, this isn't the time." "This is exactly the time." Sage looked at the facility, then at her children, then at the two Alpha brothers who represented more power than she'd ever imagined having access to. "I'm tired of running. Tired of hiding. Tired of letting other people decide my family's fate." "What are you talking about?" Knox asked, though something in his eyes suggested he already knew. "I'm talking about claiming what's mine." Sage straightened her shoulders, feeling something ancient and powerful stirring in her blood. "I'm Alpha Garrett Morningstar's daughter. The rightful heir to pack leadership. And I'm done letting Victor Ironwood destroy my people." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the government agents seemed to pause in their mobilization, as if sensing that something momentous was about to happen. "You can't be serious," Knox said quietly. "Sage, challenging for Alpha status against Victor is suicide," Roman finished bluntly. "Victor Ironwood has been Beta for 15 years. He's trained, experienced, and desperate. You're an Omega who's been hiding her heritage her entire life." "I'm an Alpha who's been protecting her family her entire life," Sage corrected. "And I won't let him hurt anyone else." Asher stepped forward, his young face set in lines of determination that made him look far older than his 10 years. "Mama's right. This ends today." Before anyone could stop him, the boy tilted his head back and let out a howl that shouldn't have been possible for someone in human form. The sound cut through the morning air like a blade, carrying power and command and an unmistakable challenge. It was answered immediately. From the facility, from the surrounding forest, from the town beyond, wolves began howling in response. The pack was coming. "Well," Roman said with something that might have been admiration. "That changes things." The battle began without ceremony. Government agents opened fire on the assembled wolves, but Roman's pack responded with tactical precision that spoke of military training. These weren't just supernatural beings, they were warriors who'd been fighting this kind of war for years. Knox grabbed Sage's arm, his eyes blazing with protective fury. Get the children out of here. My brother's people can handle the agents. No. Sage pulled free, her decision crystallizing into absolute certainty. Victor is in that facility, and as long as he's alive and free, my family will never be safe. This ends now. She turned to her children, her heart breaking at what she was about to ask of them. Stay with Knox. Stay safe. And no matter what happens in there, know that I love you more than life itself. Mama, no, Ivy whispered, her psychic abilities clearly picking up on Sage's intentions. I have to, baby. You understand why, don't you? Ivy's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. The pack needs a real alpha. Not someone who sells them to humans. That's right. Sage kissed each of her children, memorizing their faces in case this was the last time she'd see them. Be brave. Be strong. And take care of each other. Knox caught her hand as she turned toward the facility. Sage, please. There has to be another way. There is no other way. Victor won't stop until he's destroyed everything I care about. The only way to end this is to remove him from power permanently. Then let me come with you. No. Sage's voice was gentle but implacable. This is pack business. Ancient law. It has to be one-on-one combat, no outside interference. Knox's jaw clenched with frustration. I can't lose you. Not now, not when I've just found you. Sage rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into the contact. Then have faith that love is stronger than hate. She broke away before he could stop her, shifting into her wolf form as she ran toward the facility. Behind her, she heard Knox shouting orders to his brother's pack, coordinating their assault on the government agents while she disappeared into the building. The facility's interior was chaos. Emergency lights flashed, alarms wailed, and smoke from Roman's initial assault filled the corridors. Sage navigated by scent and instinct, following Victor's trail deeper into the building. She found him in what looked like a command center, surrounded by monitors showing the battle outside. He was shouting orders into a radio, his face flushed with rage and desperation. Fall back to secondary positions. We can't let them breach the inner perimeter. Victor. Sage's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He spun to face her, his pale eyes widening as he took in her wolf form. For a moment, she saw genuine fear flicker across his features. You, he breathed. Sage shifted back to human form, standing naked and unashamed in the sterile light. Power radiated from her skin like heat, the alpha heritage she'd suppressed for so long finally free to manifest. Me, she confirmed. Your worst nightmare. The rightful heir to everything you've tried to steal. Victor's hand moved toward a weapon on his belt, but Sage's voice stopped him cold. I challenge you, Victor Ironwood, for leadership of the Silverpine Pack. Ritual combat, ancient law, winner takes all. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Even over the alarms and gunfire, Sage could hear other voices in the facility going quiet. Pack members who'd been forced to work with Victor, government agents who didn't understand what they were witnessing, everyone recognizing that something primal and irreversible was about to happen. You can't be serious, Victor said, but his voice lacked conviction. Accept the challenge, or be branded a coward in front of humans and wolves alike. Sage's smile was sharp as winter. Your choice, adopted son. The taunt hit its mark. Victor's face went white with rage, and when he shifted into his wolf form, it was with the fury of a man who'd been pushed beyond his breaking point. The fight was brutal and quick and absolutely decisive. Victor was larger, more experienced, and had 15 years of beta training behind him. But Sage fought with the desperation of a mother protecting her children and the righteous fury of an alpha reclaiming her birthright. They crashed through monitors and overturned furniture, their snarls echoing off the walls as claws and fangs sought vulnerable flesh. Victor's training showed, his attacks were precise and calculated, designed to disable and dominate. But Sage's attacks were designed to kill. She was winning when the silver dart hit her flank. Agent Harrison stood in the doorway with a tranquilizer gun, his face set in lines of cold determination. Enough. You're both valuable assets, and I won't have you damaged beyond repair. The silver-laced sedative hit Sage's system like liquid fire, sending her crashing to the floor as her wolf form wavered and collapsed. Victor, sensing opportunity, lunged for her throat. He never made it. Knox burst through the facility's outer walls, literally through the reinforced concrete, his own wolf form massive and silver and radiating power that made Victor's dominance display look like a child's tantrum. He hit Victor mid-leap, sending the beta flying across the room to crash into a bank of computers. Nobody, Knox snarled, his voice carrying even in wolf form, touches my mate. But it wasn't Knox who ended the fight. As Victor struggled to his feet, preparing for another attack, a sound filled the command center that made everyone freeze. It was a howl, but not from any adult throat. This was the voice of a child, carrying power that defied every law of supernatural development. Asher stood in the doorway, his small human form radiating alpha authority that made the air itself seem to bow in submission. His dark eyes blazed with power as old as the mountains, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute command. Stop. Victor's wolf form froze mid-lunge, his body betraying him as it responded to alpha dominance it couldn't deny. Agent Harrison's gun clattered to the floor as his hands shook uncontrollably. Even Knox's massive form went still, recognizing the emergence of something unprecedented. You will not hurt my mother, Asher continued, his child's voice carrying power that made the building's steel frame groan. You will submit to the rightful alpha, or you will be cast out forever. Around them, Sage could hear other wolves responding to Asher's call. Pack members throughout the facility were shifting their loyalty, their wolves recognizing the truth of his bloodline and the legitimacy of his command. Victor shifted back to human form, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. This is impossible. He's just a child. He's the alpha heir, Sage said, struggling to her feet as the sedative fought against her supernatural healing. True blood calling to true blood. Even you can't deny what you're feeling right now. And Victor couldn't deny it. Sage could see it in his eyes, the instinctive recognition of superior dominance, the way his wolf cowered in submission despite his human mind's rebellion. I challenge you for pack leadership, Sage said formally, her voice carrying to every wolf in the facility. Do you accept, or do you yield? Victor's face cycled through rage, desperation, and finally defeated resignation. He looked around the room at the pack members who'd emerged from hiding, saw the way they were already looking to Sage and Asher for leadership, and understood that he'd lost more than just a fight. He'd lost everything. I yield, he said quietly. Sage felt power settle around her like a mantle, the alpha authority she'd been born to carry finally claiming its rightful place. But with it came responsibility and the terrible weight of what came next. Victor Ironwood, she said formally, you are hereby banished from Silverpine territory. You have 24 hours to leave, and you are never to return on pain of death. You should kill me, Victor said bitterly. I would have killed you. I'm not you, Sage replied simply. And maybe, somewhere away from here, you'll remember what it means to be worthy of the Ironwood name. Victor stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away. He paused at the door, looking back with something that might have been regret. For what it's worth, he said quietly, Garrett would be proud of you. Then he was gone, leaving Sage to deal with the aftermath of claiming her birthright. Agent Harrison was ranting about federal authority and national security, but his protests died when Roman Ravencrest appeared with evidence that the entire operation was unauthorized and illegal. Rogue agents, Roman explained, handing Sage a tablet full of incriminating documents. Operating without federal oversight, funding themselves through illegal supernatural trafficking. Knox's connections in Washington are very interested in cleaning house. What happens to the facility? Sage asked. Officially? It never existed. Unofficially? It becomes a very expensive lesson in why you don't mess with supernatural communities that have billionaire allies. Knox had shifted back to human form, and Sage found herself caught in his arms before she could process what was happening. His kiss was desperate and relieved and full of promises about never letting her face danger alone again. "It's over," he murmured against her lips. "You're safe. Your children are safe. The pack is safe. And you?" Sage pulled back to study his face. "What about Ravencrest Industries? Your board of directors?" Knox's smile was rueful but not regretful. "Officially severed all ties about an hour ago. Apparently, going native and compromising company interests for personal attachment were unforgivable sins." "So you're broke?" "Completely." Knox's grin was unrepentant. "Just a drifter looking for honest work and a place to belong." Sage looked around the command center, at her children, who were safe and whole, at the pack members who were looking to her for leadership, at the man who'd given up everything to stand with her family. "I might know a gas station that needs rebuilding," she said. "The pay isn't great, but the benefits package includes 3 amazing kids and an alpha who's completely, hopelessly in love with her head mechanic." Knox's answer was lost in another kiss, but Sage didn't need words to understand his response. They'd won. Against government conspiracies and pack traders and billion-dollar corporations, they'd won. And now the real work could begin, building something better than what they'd lost, something worthy of the legacy Alpha Garrett Morningstar had entrusted to his daughter's hands. Chapter 8. 6 months after the battle that changed everything, Sage Morningstar stood on the rebuilt porch of what had once been a failing gas station and marveled at how completely her world had transformed. Where rusted pumps and cracked asphalt had once told a story of decline, gleaming solar panels and state-of-the-art equipment now spoke of innovation and hope. The Moonrise Cooperative wasn't just a gas station anymore, it was the headquarters of the first supernatural human partnership venture in the Pacific Northwest, funded by the natural gas rights that had nearly destroyed her family and built on the foundation of trust that had saved them. "The morning delivery from Seattle is here," Knox called from the office they converted from the old convenience store. His voice carried the kind of easy contentment that still made her heart skip, even after months of waking up beside him every morning. Sage watched him emerge into the sunlight, his dark hair catching the autumn light as he supervised the unloading of equipment bound for the pack's new community center. The expensive motorcycle was long gone, replaced by a practical pickup truck that could haul supplies and car seats with equal efficiency. Knox claimed he didn't miss his old life, and looking at him now, sleeves rolled up, genuine smile on his face as he directed the delivery crew, Sage believed him. "Mrs. DeRice order?" she asked, joining him beside the truck. 3 industrial-grade generators and enough solar battery storage to power half of Chinatown, Knox confirmed with a grin. Turns out supernatural-owned businesses are very interested in energy independence. The success still amazed Sage sometimes. What had started as a desperate attempt to save her inheritance had evolved into something unprecedented, a network of supernatural communities using their natural resources to fund modernization and protection. The natural gas reserves beneath Silverpine territory were just the beginning. Knox's connections and her alpha authority had opened doors to markets she'd never dreamed existed. "Mama." Ivy's voice carried across the lot, filled with the kind of excitement that meant either something wonderful or something terrifying had happened. Sage turned to see her daughter running toward them, her 9-year-old face bright with discovery. Behind her, Owen jogged more sedately, his expression thoughtful in the way that meant he was processing something important. "What is it, baby?" Sage asked, crouching down to catch Ivy as she launched herself forward. "I can hear the generators thinking," Ivy announced breathlessly. "Well, not thinking exactly, but they have these electrical patterns that feel like thoughts. And Owen thinks he might be able to phase them if they break, fix them from the inside." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Your children are planning to become a supernatural tech support team?" "They're exploring their gifts," Sage corrected, though she couldn't help smiling at the image. "Dr. Martinez says their abilities are developing exactly as they should." Dr. Elena Martinez was a geneticist from Roman Ravencrest's Boston Pack, one of the first researchers to study supernatural abilities openly and ethically. She'd been working with the twins for 3 months, helping them understand and control their gifts without the fear and secrecy that had defined Sage's own childhood. "Speaking of developing abilities," Knox said, nodding toward the training area they'd built behind the station. Sage followed his gaze to where Asher was practicing combat forms with a determination that reminded her powerfully of his father, whoever that had been. At 11, her son was already showing the kind of natural leadership that would serve him well as the pack's future alpha. But more importantly, he was learning to temper that authority with compassion. He's been working on that sequence for an hour, Knox continued. Won't quit until he gets it perfect. He gets that from both sides of his family, Sage said dryly. Stubborn is a Morningstar trait. Good thing stubbornness tends to work out for your family. Before Sage could respond, a familiar figure emerged from the forest path that connected the station to the main pack territory. Alpha Riker Shadowmere moved with the easy confidence of a leader who no longer had to worry about federal agents or pack traders, his pale eyes taking in the bustling activity with satisfaction. Sage, Knox, he greeted them. The council meeting went well. The Cascade Range Coalition officially voted to adopt our cooperative model. The coalition was an alliance of supernatural communities throughout Washington and Oregon, formed in the aftermath of the government facility raid. What had started as a defensive measure against future federal interference had evolved into something more ambitious, a coordinated effort to bring supernatural communities into the modern economy while protecting their traditional ways of life. All of them? Sage asked. All 12 packs, plus the Raven clan from the Olympic Peninsula and the Selkie community from the coast. Riker's smile was genuinely pleased. By this time next year, we'll have the largest supernatural-owned energy cooperative in North America. Knox whistled low. That's going to require some serious infrastructure investment. Which brings me to why I'm here, Riker said, producing a tablet with financial projections that made Sage's eyes widen. The preliminary estimates for Phase 2 expansion. Sage studied the numbers, her mind automatically calculating logistics and timelines. 6 months ago, she'd been struggling to afford gas pump repairs. Now she was reviewing plans for a multi-million-dollar development project that would transform supernatural communities across the region. The board meeting is next week, she asked. Tuesday. Knox, we'll need your contacts in the renewable energy sector. And Sage, the coalition wants you to serve as the primary liaison with human business communities. The irony wasn't lost on her. The bastard Omega who'd once been mocked as nobody was now the public face of supernatural economic development. But then, her entire life had been built on ironies that had turned out to be blessings in disguise. I'll be there, she promised. Riker nodded and headed back toward pack territory, leaving Sage and Knox alone with the twins, who had discovered that the delivery truck's electronic systems were apparently very entertaining to Ivy's psychic senses. Busy week ahead, Knox observed. Busy life ahead, Sage corrected. Are you sure you don't miss the simplicity of being a billionaire CEO? Just profit margins and board meetings and corporate acquisitions? Knox's laugh was rich and genuine. You mean the life where I had everything I thought I wanted and nothing that actually mattered? Not for a second. He pulled her close, his arms encircling her waist in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Sage leaned into his warmth, marveling at how perfectly they fit together, not just physically, but in all the ways that truly counted. Besides, Knox murmured against her hair, I discovered that true wealth isn't measured in bank balances. What's it measured in? 8-year-olds who think you're worth trusting. 11-year-olds who ask for advice on being a fair leader. And the woman who taught me that love isn't something you acquire, it's something you build, day by day, choice by choice. Sage was about to tell him exactly how much she loved him when a new voice interrupted the moment. I hope I'm not intruding. They turned to see a figure approaching from the highway, a man walking with the careful posture of someone who wasn't sure of his welcome. It took Sage a moment to recognize Victor Ironwood, partly because 6 months of exile had changed him so dramatically. Gone was the polished beta who'd courted pack approval and plotted government deals. In his place stood someone leaner, weathered, with eyes that held the kind of hard-won humility that came from losing everything and finding out who you really were underneath. Knox tensed, his protective instincts flaring, but Sage placed a calming hand on his arm. Victor. Alpha Morningstar. Victor's tone was respectful, formal. I'm hoping you might have a few minutes to talk. Sage studied him, noting the way he held himself, alert but not aggressive, ready to leave if asked but hoping he wouldn't be. "Walk with me." They strolled toward the edge of the property, where the renovated gas station gave way to the forest that had sheltered her family during the darkest days of the crisis. Knox followed at a discreet distance, close enough to help if needed but far enough away to give them privacy. "You look good," Victor said quietly. "Being alpha suits you." "Thank you." Sage waited, sensing there was more he needed to say. "I've spent the last 6 months thinking about everything that happened. About the choices I made, the people I hurt, the damage I caused." Victor's voice was steady but tinged with regret. "I can't undo any of it. I can't bring back the trust one betrayed or the lives I put at risk. But I'd like the chance to do better." "What did you have in mind?" Victor stopped walking, turning to face her with an expression of quiet determination. "The government agents I worked with weren't the only ones targeting supernatural communities. There are other groups, other threats that most packs don't even know exist. I have contacts, information, skills that could help protect our people from future attacks." "You want to work security?" "I want to make amends. I know I can never fully atone for what I did, but maybe I can keep other families from going through what I put yours through." Sage considered this, weighing forgiveness against pragmatism. Victor had nearly destroyed everything she cared about, but he'd also been shaped by the same pack politics and hidden resentments that had made her own childhood so difficult. And if he was genuine about wanting redemption? "Probationary basis," she said finally. 6-month trial period, full transparency about your activities, and you answer directly to Knox. Victor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Not to you?" "Knox has connections in the security and intelligence communities that you'll need access to. And frankly, he's less inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt if you backslide." "That's fair." Victor nodded slowly. "More than fair, actually. Thank you, Sage. For the chance and for..." He gestured vaguely at the bustling cooperative around them. "For proving that Garrett was right to choose you." They walked back toward the station in companionable silence, the weight of old grievances not forgotten but transformed into something that might eventually become mutual respect. The rest of the day passed in the comfortable rhythm that had become Sage's new normal. Meetings with suppliers, phone calls with pack leaders, reviewing expansion proposals that would have been incomprehensible to her a year ago. Knox worked beside her, his business expertise and her intuitive leadership creating a partnership that was greater than the sum of its parts. As evening approached, the twins reluctantly agreed to help Asher with his homework, a compromise that involved Ivy using her psychic abilities to make sure Owen actually focused on his math instead of practicing phasing pencils through his desk. "Family dinner?" Knox asked, nodding toward the apartment above the station that they'd expanded and renovated into a proper home. "In a minute." Sage found herself reluctant to go inside, to end a day that had been particularly satisfying. "I want to watch the sunset first." They settled on the porch swing Knox had installed, another practical improvement that had nothing to do with business efficiency and everything to do with creating a home. The autumn air was crisp with the promise of winter, but the last rays of sunlight painted the mountains in shades of gold and amber that made the world look like something out of a fairy tale. "Penny for your thoughts," Knox said, his arms settling around her shoulders. "Just thinking about how much has changed." Sage leaned into his warmth. "A year ago, I was barely keeping the lights on. Now we're planning energy cooperatives and supernatural business alliances. It feels like someone else's life sometimes. Any regrets?" Sage considered this seriously. "About the danger we went through? About almost losing the children? Yes. But about the outcome? About finding you, about discovering what I was really capable of, about building something that helps our entire community?" She shook her head. "No regrets about any of that." Knox was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing abstract patterns on her shoulder. "Sage, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Something in his tone made her look up, noting the way his expression had shifted from relaxed contentment to nervous anticipation. "What is it?" Instead of answering immediately, Knox shifted on the swing, turning to face her more fully. That's when Sage noticed what he was holding, a small velvet box that made her heart stop completely. "Knox," she breathed. "I know we haven't talked about this specifically," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I know we've been building something together day by day, and maybe that's enough. But Sage, I want more than just building a business or raising children together. I want to build a life with you. A real life, with promises and commitments and a future that belongs to both of us." He opened the box to reveal a ring that made her gasp. It wasn't a traditional diamond solitaire. Instead, the band was crafted from silver that seemed to glow with its own inner light, set with a stone that caught the sunset and threw it back in facets of fire. "The silver came from the first mining operation we funded," Knox explained softly. "And the stone is a rare mineral from the same geological survey that started this whole adventure. I thought you might like something that represented what we've built together." Sage stared at the ring, then at the man who'd given up a fortune to help her save her family, who'd stood beside her through government conspiracies and PAC politics and the terrifying responsibility of leadership. The man who'd taught her children that love wasn't a weakness but the greatest strength anyone could possess. "Are you asking me to marry you, Knox Ravencrest?" "I'm asking you to be my mate in every sense of the word. Human law, PAC law, and everything in between." Knox's green eyes were intense as they met hers. "I'm asking you to trust me with the rest of your life, the way you trusted me with your family's survival." Sage felt tears building behind her eyes, but they were the good kind, the kind that came from happiness too large to contain. "You know what I discovered about trust?" "What?" "It's not something you give once and hope for the best. It's something you choose, over and over again, every day." She held out her left hand, watching as Knox's face lit up with joy and relief. "And I choose to trust you, Knox Ravencrest. Today and every day for the rest of our lives." The ring slid onto her finger like it had been made for that exact moment, the silver warm against her skin and the stone catching the last rays of sunlight. Knox's kiss was gentle and fierce and full of promises about the future they were going to build together. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Sage noticed they had an audience. All three of her children were pressed against the apartment windows, grinning with the kind of delight that suggested they'd been hoping for this development for quite some time. "I think we have their approval," Knox said, following her gaze. "Good thing," Sage replied. "Because there's something else I need to tell you." Knox's expression shifted to mild concern. "What?" Sage took his hand and placed it against her still flat stomach, watching as understanding dawned in his eyes. "Dr. Martinez confirmed it yesterday. Apparently, alpha genetics and stress relief are a potent combination. You're pregnant." Knox's voice was filled with wonder. "We're going to have a baby." Sage's smile was radiant. "Our children are going to have a sibling who grows up knowing they're loved and wanted and part of something bigger than themselves." Knox's response was lost in another kiss, this one deeper and more passionate than the first. When they finally came up for air, the sun had set completely, leaving them surrounded by the gentle glow of the station's lights and the warm presence of home. "I love you," Knox murmured against her lips. "All of you, Sage, Asher, Ivy, Owen, and whoever this new little one turns out to be." "We love you too," Sage replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. As they sat together on the porch swing, surrounded by the proof of everything they'd built and protected and transformed, Sage found herself thinking about her father's legacy. Alpha Garrett Morningstar had left her a failing gas station and a mountain of secrets, but he'd also left her something more valuable than natural gas rights or mineral claims. He'd left her the chance to discover that sometimes the greatest treasures really were hidden in the most unexpected places. Not in the ground beneath their feet, but in the love of a good man, the laughter of children, and the knowledge that they'd taken something broken and made it whole again. The Moonrise Cooperative gleamed in the darkness around them, no longer a symbol of shame or struggle but a beacon of hope for every supernatural community willing to believe in a better future. And at its heart sat Sage Morningstar Ravencrest, once a nobody Omega, now an Alpha who'd learned that the most important inheritance anyone could leave wasn't money or property. It was the courage to love fearlessly and the wisdom to recognize treasure when it came disguised as trouble. Knox squeezed her hand, the new ring catching the light like a promise made manifest. ready to go tell the kids they're getting a new sibling? Sage smiled, thinking of Asher's protective instincts, Ivy's psychic excitement, and Owen's gentle curiosity about this new development. Ready to start the next chapter of our lives. Hand in hand, they walked into their home, into their future, into the kind of happiness that came from building something together one choice at a time. Outside, the renovated gas station hummed with quiet efficiency, its lights a beacon in the darkness for anyone who needed to believe that sometimes, against all odds, love really could conquer everything. Epilogue. 2 years later. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of the Ravencrest family home, illuminating a scene of beautiful chaos that had become Sage's favorite way to start each day. 18-month-old Luna Ravencrest sat in her high chair, systematically deconstructing a piece of toast while babbling in the mixture of human words and wolf sounds that Dr. Martinez assured them was perfectly normal for supernatural children. "Mama, Luna's trying to phase her breakfast again," Ivy announced from the table, where she was helping Owen with his science project, a working model of sustainable energy systems that would have impressed university professors. "She's not phasing, she's just making a mess," 13-year-old Asher corrected with the patient tone of an older brother who'd become an expert at supernatural child development. "Real phasing takes concentration. She's just being a baby." Sage smiled as she flipped pancakes, watching Nox attempt to convince their daughter that solid food was meant to be eaten, not experimented with. At 36, he'd grown into fatherhood with the same determination he'd once applied to corporate acquisitions, though his methods were considerably gentler. "Luna, sweetheart," Nox cooed, making airplane noises as he guided a spoonful of applesauce toward her mouth. Food goes in the mouth, not through the high chair tray. Luna giggled and clapped her hands, sending applesauce flying in all directions. Nox sighed and reached for more paper towels, his expensive business suits long since replaced by clothes that could survive toddler mealtime disasters. "I'll get her," Sage offered, moving to rescue her husband from their daughter's enthusiastic rejection of breakfast. But as she reached for Luna, something extraordinary happened. The baby's chubby hands began to glow with a soft, warm light that made everyone in the kitchen go still. Luna looked at the glowing hands with delight, reaching toward the scrambled eggs on Nox's plate. Where her fingers touched the food, it began to warm up, not just heated, but perfectly temperature-controlled for a toddler's sensitive mouth. "Did she just?" Nox started. "Thermal manipulation," Dr. Martinez's voice came from the kitchen doorway, where she stood with her ever-present tablet and an expression of fascinated delight. "I've theorized about it but never seen it manifested so young. Luna appears to have inherited heat generation abilities from her alpha bloodline, combined with the precision control that suggests Ravencrest genetics. Is it safe?" Sage asked, though Luna seemed perfectly comfortable with her glowing hands. "Completely. She's instinctively regulating the temperature to exactly what she needs. It's actually quite sophisticated for such a young manifestation." Dr. Martinez made notes on her tablet. "I suspect she'll be able to warm bottles, help with cooking, even provide therapeutic heat as she gets older. A very practical gift." "Great," Nox said dryly. "Our daughter is going to be a supernatural space heater." Luna seemed to understand that she was the center of attention. She clapped her glowing hands together and giggled, sending sparkles of warm light dancing around the kitchen like benevolent fireflies. "Show off," Asher said affectionately, reaching over to ruffle his little sister's dark hair. "At least wait until you can walk before you start mastering elemental manipulation." The sound of vehicles pulling into the cooperative's parking area interrupted the family moment. Through the window, Sage could see the monthly coalition meeting attendees arriving, alpha leaders from across the Pacific Northwest, human business partners, and the growing network of supernatural communities that had embraced the cooperative model. "Big day today," Nox observed, Luna now contentedly eating perfectly warmed scrambled eggs from her glowing fingers. "The biggest yet," Sage agreed. "If the vote passes, we'll be opening cooperative chapters in 3 more states." The Moonrise Cooperative had exceeded every projection, becoming a model for supernatural human collaboration that was being studied and replicated across North America. What had started as Sage's desperate attempt to save a failing gas station was now a multi-state network of sustainable energy projects, supernatural-owned businesses, and community development initiatives. "Nervous?" Knox asked, noting the way Sage was fidgeting with her wedding ring. Excited, she corrected. 2 years ago, I was worried about keeping the lights on. Now we're talking about transforming how supernatural communities integrate with the modern economy. It feels like a dream sometimes. Dreams have a way of coming true when you're brave enough to fight for them, a familiar voice said from the doorway. Victor Ironwood stood there in his security uniform, looking healthier and more settled than Sage had seen him since they were children. His work protecting supernatural communities from government interference had given him purpose and, gradually, a measure of peace with his past choices. Victor, Sage smiled genuinely. Ready for the security briefing? Always. Though I have to say, having coalition meetings in the place where I once tried to destroy everything feels. He paused, searching for words. Like coming full circle, I suppose. The best redemption stories usually do, Knox said, offering Victor a cup of coffee. Circle back to where the damage was done, but with wisdom instead of anger. Victor accepted the coffee gratefully. Speaking of wisdom, Asher, I have those leadership theory books you requested. The ones about balancing authority with compassion. Asher's face lit up. At 13, he was already showing the kind of thoughtful leadership that would serve the pack well when he eventually took over. But unlike previous generations, his training included perspectives from human management theory, conflict resolution techniques, and the kind of emotional intelligence that would help him lead in a changing world. Thanks, Uncle Victor, Asher said, using the honorary title that had evolved naturally over the past year. Victor's face softened at the address. Being accepted as part of the family he'd once tried to destroy was a gift he never took for granted. All right, everyone, Sage announced, beginning the familiar choreography of getting a large family ready for the day. Coalition meeting starts in an hour. Asher, you're observing the leadership sessions. Ivy and Owen, Dr. Martinez wants to continue your ability development training after school. And Luna. She looked at her youngest, who was now making her sippy cup glow with gentle warmth. Luna gets to come to the meeting and charm everyone into voting our way, Knox finished with a grin. It's not manipulation if she's just being naturally adorable, Sage protested. Tell that to the alpha from Montana who spent the entire last meeting making funny faces to get her to giggle, Ivy said with psychic-enhanced perception that caught every emotional undercurrent in the room. He's definitely voting yes on everything because Luna smiled at him. The morning dissolved into the controlled chaos of a busy family preparing for an important day. Knox handled the logistics while Sage reviewed presentation materials. Victor coordinated security arrangements with his team. Dr. Martinez helped the twins pack equipment for their afternoon training session. And through it all, Luna provided a soundtrack of happy babbling and the occasional burst of warm, sparkly light. As the coalition meeting began, Sage found herself standing at the podium where she'd once begged for 30 days to save her inheritance. Now she was presenting expansion plans that would affect thousands of supernatural families across the continent. 2 years ago, the Moonrise Cooperative was born out of necessity, she began, looking out at an audience that included some of the most powerful supernatural leaders in North America. We needed to protect our community from forces that wanted to exploit our resources and expose our people. But what we built was something greater than protection. We built a model for prosperity that honors both our traditions and our future. The presentation covered statistics that still amazed her: job creation numbers, environmental impact assessments, profit margins that exceeded conventional energy companies while maintaining ethical standards that protected supernatural workers and communities. But the real testament to their success wasn't in the numbers. It was in the faces of the audience. Alpha leaders who no longer worried about their pack's economic survival, human partners who discovered that supernatural collaboration brought innovations they'd never imagined, and young supernatural adults who were entering a job market where their abilities were assets rather than secrets to be hidden. The question before us today, Sage continued, isn't whether we can afford to expand. It's whether we can afford not to. Every month we delay, more communities remain vulnerable to exploitation. More families struggle with the choice between hiding their nature and providing for their children. More potential is wasted because fear keeps us isolated. When the vote came, it was unanimous. Not just in favor of expansion, but in favor of accelerating the timeline. Within 5 years, the cooperative model would be available to every supernatural community in North America that wanted to participate. After the meeting, as the last of the coalition members departed, Sage found herself alone on the porch where Knox had proposed. The autumn air was crisp with the promise of winter, but the cooperative hummed with activity that would continue regardless of season. Knox joined her, Luna sleeping peacefully in his arms, her small hands still glowing faintly with residual warmth. "Proud of you," he said simply. "Proud of us," Sage corrected. "This was never just my vision. It was ours, from the moment you decided to stay and help instead of walking away. Best decision I ever made." Knox shifted Luna carefully, freeing one arm to wrap around Sage's shoulders. "Though I have to admit, I never imagined it would lead to this." He gestured at the scene around them, the bustling cooperative, the children's laughter from the training area where Asher was helping Owen practice controlled phasing, Ivy's delighted squeals as she successfully communicated with the building's electrical systems. "What did you imagine?" Sage asked. Knox was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Honestly, I thought I'd help you save the gas station, maybe start something small and local. I never dreamed we'd build something that could change how supernatural communities interact with the world." "And personally? What did you imagine for us?" Knox's smile was soft and completely content. "A life together. A family. The chance to build something meaningful with someone I loved." He looked down at Luna, then over at their older children, then back at Sage. "Everything I imagined, and so much more than I ever dared to hope for." Sage leaned into his warmth, watching the sun set over the mountains that had sheltered her family during their darkest hours. The Moonrise Cooperative spread out below them like a small city, its lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The old life? The wealth, the corporate power? You know what I've learned about power?" Knox said, his voice reflective. "Real power isn't what you can buy or command. It's what you can build, what you can protect, what you can create that makes the world better for the people you love." Luna stirred in his arms, her small hands glowing brighter for a moment before settling back into sleep. Even unconscious, she radiated the kind of contentment that came from being completely secure in her family's love. "And wealth?" Sage prompted. Knox's laugh was rich and genuine. "I used to think wealth was numbers in a bank account. Now I know it's bedtime stories and family dinners and the way Luna's face lights up when she sees us. It's watching Asher grow into the kind of leader who'll make the world better. It's seeing Ivy and Owen discover abilities that amaze even the experts." He paused, his arm tightening around Sage's shoulders. "It's knowing that no matter what challenges come next, we'll face them together. That's the kind of wealth that can't be lost or stolen or manipulated by market forces." Sage felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind, the ones that came from happiness too large to contain. "I love you, Knox Ravencrest." "I love you too, Sage Morningstar Ravencrest. Today and always." As full darkness settled over the cooperative, the family gradually gathered on the porch. Asher, glowing with pride after successfully mediating a minor dispute between younger pack members. Ivy and Owen, chattering excitedly about new applications they discovered for their abilities. Victor, reporting that all security protocols had been successfully implemented for the expanded operations. Dr. Martinez appeared last, her tablet tucked away for once, looking more like a family friend than a researcher. "How did the afternoon sessions go?" Sage asked. "Extraordinarily well. Ivy's psychic range has increased by 30%. And Owen successfully phased a malfunctioning generator back to working condition." Dr. Martinez smiled at the children. "But more importantly, they're learning to use their gifts in service of their community. That's the real measure of successful ability development." "Speaking of successful development," Knox said, nodding toward Luna, who had woken up and was making the porch lights glow brighter with unconscious thermal manipulation, "any predictions about what other surprises our daughter might have in store? With her genetic heritage? The possibilities are endless." Dr. Martinez's eyes twinkled with scientific curiosity. "But whatever abilities manifest, she'll have the best possible support system to help her master them safely. As the evening wound down and the children reluctantly agreed to start getting ready for bed, Sage found herself thinking about the conversation she'd had with her father in a dream the night before Luna was born. "You did good, daughter," Garrett's voice had been warm with pride. "Better than I ever imagined when I left you that old gas station. You took something broken and made it whole. You took something small and made it significant. You took something shameful and made it a symbol of hope." "I had help," she'd replied in the dream. "I couldn't have done any of this alone. The best leaders never do it alone. They surround themselves with people who share their vision and complement their weaknesses. Knox, the children, even Victor in his way, they're all part of the pack you've built. And that pack will outlast any of us individually." Now, watching Knox carry a sleepy Luna upstairs while the older children helped Victor secure the building for the night, Sage understood what her father had meant. The Moonrise Cooperative wasn't just a business or even a social experiment. It was a new kind of pack, one that included supernatural and human members, one that valued cooperation over dominance, one that measured success not just in profit but in the well-being of everyone it touched. "Mama?" Ivy appeared beside her, using her psychic abilities to sense Sage's contemplative mood. "You're thinking about Grandpa Garrett, aren't you? How did you know? You get a specific feeling when you remember him. Like sadness and pride and love all mixed together." Ivy slipped her hand into Sage's. "He's proud of you, you know. I can feel it sometimes, like an echo in the building's energy." Sage squeezed her daughter's hand, not questioning the psychic intuition that had proven remarkably accurate. "I hope so, baby. I hope we've built something he would approve of." "He more than approves," Ivy said with the certainty of youth. "He's amazed. He never imagined it could become this big, this important. But mostly he's happy that you found love and that we're all safe." Knox's voice drifted down from upstairs, the sound of him reading Luna a bedtime story in the gentle tone he reserved for their youngest. Asher was in his room, probably reviewing the leadership materials Victor had given him. Owen was likely practicing small-scale phasing exercises under his blankets. It was the sound of a family at peace, a community thriving, a future bright with possibility. "Come on," Sage said to Ivy. "Let's go say goodnight to everyone." As they climbed the stairs together, Sage caught a glimpse of their reflection in the landing window, a mother and daughter whose lives had been transformed by love, courage, and the willingness to fight for what mattered most. Outside, the Moonrise Cooperative settled into its nighttime rhythm, solar batteries storing energy for tomorrow, security systems protecting the dreams of families who no longer had to choose between hiding their nature and providing for their children. And in the apartment above it all, the Ravencrest family prepared for sleep, secure in the knowledge that they had built something worth protecting, something worth expanding, something worth passing on to the next generation. Sage's last conscious thought as she drifted off in Knox's arms was a prayer of gratitude, for second chances and unexpected love, for children who would grow up free to be themselves, for a community that had embraced change and chosen hope over fear. The end. Thank you for listening. Like, share and subscribe for more.